posted or any other information in terms of public notice of the application?
I cannot give any personal testimony as to the evidence of the Z card being posted. However, the presence of a Z card in the window is noted in the appellant's submission documents.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any questions from the board for Mary? So, yeah, Brad.
You're
There
muted.
you go. I got it. So the application that was appealed did not include the shed, but includes widening or moving the driveway?
The abutting neighbor is questioning the accuracy, the validity of the site plan that was provided and disagrees with the location of the property lines. So the shed is out of the picture. The shed was not included in the approval.
So this is the existing driveway that is being objected to relative to the property line. Is that correct?
The applicant proposed to refresh driveways, which he defined as recovering them with gravel. And they were to be done to the same dimensions in the same location. And we went to a previously approved site plan to determine those dimensions.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And that site plan is in the land records, Mary?
It's in our zoning files, yes.
Can I speak?
Yeah, hold on, Missa.
Okay.
Any more questions for Mary? All right.
I should note that that site plan that was utilized in staff review and the submission of the applicant was the original site plan when the property was rehabilitated and turned into 4 units. So it's the one that the ZBA reviewed and approved.
Okay. Ravi?
Just for clarification, staff has determined that the appeal was filed within 15 days. Forms are filed within 15 days because I am understanding there is a form that an appellant has to file with the appropriate fees. Would that be correct?
The appeal was not filed until day, let's see, 15, 16, 17, day 18. The appeal period expired on a Saturday. The neighbor contacted us Monday just after we'd released the permit, and she filed her appeal on Tuesday.
Got it. Thanks.
You're welcome.
And I think we have the appellant. Oh, Keenan, sorry.
Keenan, yeah.
Just real quick, was the voicemail just a question about how to file an appeal? Was it related to an appeal? Can you just give us a little more context of the substance of the voicemail?
May I defer to Scott, who heard the voicemail? I was only given information what day it came.
Yeah, I'm the one who checked the voicemails. It was lost in a pile of many, many voicemails during the circumstances that Mary described. No, the voicemail didn't say, gee, I want to file an appeal. It was inquiring about details as to the application. And of course, follow up with that may or may not have led to appeal.
Brad?
AJ, I guess I'm just trying to understand this, that the original application on this property when the first site plan was approved was 1990. What was the date on it? The original?
1982, August of 1982.
That's when the driveway and the site plan was approved and is on record.
Correct.
Right? The original site plan. So I guess I'm confused that right now what's actually being appealed is that location of the driveway. Am I understanding that correctly?
If you're moving on to the substance, the abutting neighbor has a conflicting survey.
Okay,
Not for,
Okay.
not done intentionally for this property, but one she has in her possession.
right. So there's no new work that's being proposed that is raising this issue. It's actually, it's current because of the current permit.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mary, can you remind us how we've handled these kinds of property line disputes? We obviously don't have jurisdiction over the property dispute issue. But with respect to determining appropriate boundaries for items that are within our consideration, I don't know if you've got any further background you can give us on how we've approached that previously.
I can only give you my observations for the last 16 years that the DRB is not inclined to take up property rights, property boundary issues.
So, but if there's a factual dispute about where a property boundary is, and that the location of that boundary might reflect on our ability to approve or not, or deny the request in front of us, do you have any further insight into how that's been handled previously?
I can't think of a single example. Perhaps Scott can think of one.
No, not like this, I can't. I would only say that we've had, on rare occasion, appeal periods timeout on the weekend, in which case it's been practiced to allow a Monday filing, but I can't think of a case like this.
Jeff, I think we dealt with this in another case where a condition was, where there's been a dispute, we've said you need to provide a survey. We've dealt with it in an offense case or once or twice.
Yeah, something sounds familiar there. Yeah.
I can recall the chair advising an applicant and appellant to go get a survey and to work towards resolution. I think part of the basis of the appeal here is the qualification of who did the survey. So that is even more of a quandary.
Okay, thank you.
AJ, I'm wondering if we shouldn't take both items separately, the timeliness of the appeal prior to the substance in here, only testimony of timeliness versus the substance of the appeal itself. Up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that. I think in our deliberations, we're going to have to deliberate on both of those, but separately as well. I think it's a question. I'd like to hear just from Missa, who I recall is a member of our esteemed team a while back. So if we've got nothing else from Mary right now, Missa, do you want to comment in here and share your perspective with us, both on the timeliness issue and on the substance? I think.
Yes, I would like to speak on the timeliness first, in terms of the process and how it kind of unfolded, because I think I do realize COVID presents an unusual situation. And the voicemail that I had left was in regards to the property line. So Alan gave me a copy of the permit for zoning ahead of submitting it to the zoning department. On the application site plan and in his written documentation, it says that he would keep a 5-foot setback from the property line. This I did not agree. I did not disagree with. What I disagreed with was on the original site plan that was approved previous to him owning the property. When the property was originally developed, showed an incorrect site plan, property line location. I then provided Alan with this, a surveyed drawing showing the correct property line. And the drawing was corrected, but the property line was not corrected. It was updated with new dimensions. I had called the office, as I said, during the appeal time, and then I had never heard back from them. The day of the last appeal, so the expiration happened on a Saturday. Technically, I still had to that Monday to appeal. and I have email communication with Scott asking about this application. He mentions that there's no, because at this point, I still didn't know who was reviewing the application. And there was no record in the system that there was even a permit filed. And that was the last day, technically, that I could have appealed. The day afterwards, after I had emailed the city lawyer and Scott and called the planning and zoning office to say that this phone call was missed and there's no record of this permit even being filed on the last day of the appeal. What are my rights to file a late appeal? They came back and said, well, technically you had till Monday to do so, but that has passed. You could file a late appeal. Here I am. I filed it as soon as possible with all the documentation, required documentation and communication.
I can just note a very brief aside on what Missa just said. So there was, I'll call it a hiccup in the zoning system, the zoning permit system. My initial contact with her was that there's a split between two permits. One was under, I think it was just 8 Strong Street, and the other was under 4-8 Strong Street. So when I initially looked, I said, gee, Missa, it looks like there's only a permit here for, I think it was windows or something, right? Not knowing that there was also a permit live under 4-8, which also added to some delay and confusion as to what exactly was going on.
So it sounds like what Miss is saying, she contacted the office twice, once by phone and once by email, didn't get a response to the phone call. And the email response on the day of the appeal deadline actually told her there's not a permit.
Yeah, I'd have to go back to look at the timelines, but yeah, my initial response was, gee, there's no permit for that. And the reason for that was this other permit that's under appeal was under 4-8 versus just 8.
Okay.
I provided that email communication with my application.
Yeah, I see that. Thank you, Missa.
Thank you. So can you, Missa, help us understand, we had this discussion about surveys and the site plans. Can you explain to us what you think the problem is with the approval being based on that other site plan that was in the records?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'll give you some history of the property prior to Alan owning it. It has been a single tandem parking space for the past 12 or 15 years, and there's grass grown in that other 2 parking spaces, and you can see that in the photo documentation that Alan submitted with his application. And it wasn't until this sort of renewal came where Alan said, a new property owner came into the picture, where he was essentially, in my opinion, widening the driveway, that we sort of uncovered the complexities of what was really happening there. And my stance on this is, again, I don't have an issue with, if you can, I do feel that it's really tight. There's a total of 23 feet between the 2 properties, and that's when you measure it on site. There's also 2 gas meters, 3 gas meters on his side. There's a gas meter on my side that then narrows that distance between the 2 properties even more. So to actually fit those two side-by-side tandem cars doesn't seem realistic to me, and also potentially could damage my property, my home, which, since I've owned my home, there hasn't been a driveway right up against my home.
Over.
Say that again?
It's been grassed over, what you're saying?
Yes, and in fact, we have maintained it for those 50, since I've owned my property. My wife moved in here in 2009, so we've maintained it for 10 years as grass. So that being said, I wanted to talk about the validity of the previous site plan. And I know that Mary said that the original application in 1982, so the original application that was submitted was on August 30th, 1982, and that's she provided that documentation to you, and it calls out to create 4 units and 8 parking spaces. That application does not have a site plan attached to it. The site plan that then was later approved was for 4/26/1983. So I'm assuming it was then an as-built drawing after construction and after completion of the project. And so the original drawings the driveways that were approved were not really part of the original application. And that site plan that was approved is incorrect in terms of showing property line. And I submitted in my application a land surveyed site plan showing record of pin locations, and which I actually took a picture of today. There is a pin in the northeast corner of my property, and I took the measurements out, and we have a 1-foot property line to the west side of our house. So the original application, what rules? Is it the dimension off of the property line, which shows a 5'6" setback on that original drawing from the property line? Or does it say that the 16-foot driveway is the ruling factor, which I believe was submitted after the application, and also is incorrect. So I don't suggest that this is an easy decision, but I do think that there are ways to go about finding compromise. And I would also note that I also looked at the application again for the length of the driveway to the west, and it's saying that driveway is 34 feet long, but then on the original application, then he changed it to 39 feet. And in fact, there's only 37 feet. The original application says there's a front yard setback of 10 feet, and that property is only 27 feet. So the driveway on the west would only be 37 feet long, and not 39 feet to be renewed. So that wouldn't even allow for 2 sets of tandem parking to meet city requirements. And I also looked up the code, the 1974 zoning ordinance that would have been applicable for this application, and the parking space requirements back then were 200 square feet, which was 10 foot wide and 20 foot long. And if that's the case, a 16-foot wide parking space would have never have indicated that there should be four cars parked in that location. So there's multiple issues at hand here, I believe. And I also believe that there was a lot coverage requirement in that 1974 ordinance of 50%. It's now 40%. So even if at that time that Duncan Wisniewski, who submitted the site plan, he would have been over coverage to the dimensions that Alan is proposing those driveway dimensions at. So it's multi-layered.
But you're not suggesting that we find the 19, whatever it was, 82 or 83 approval, that map inaccurate? Are you asking us to invalidate that?
I am asking that it's being used as a valid site plan today.
And you say it's invalid based on a survey you've done?
It's not correct. Correct. Yeah. It's not accurate. There's dimensional discrepancies that exist.
All right. Anybody have any questions from Missa?
I would have is both on Google Street View and from the photos supplied by the applicant. You can see where it appears to me that there was gravel that had been grass had grown through, and just from my eye looking at both images, it appears that gravel does align with the curb cut. Could you speak to those 2 issues?
Yeah, the original curb cut. You're talking about the curb cut in the road?
The driveway apron, yes, that connects the sidewalk to the road. I look at it on both both Google and on the applicant photo. And it appears that where that gravel, where the grass has grown through it, does align directly with that. I'm just wondering.
Right. So yeah, again, it hasn't been used as a 4-car driveway. It's been used as a 2-car driveway. And they just last summer, I believe it was last summer, redid the driveway portion from the sidewalk to the road, and the width of that. And previously, the width of that was only for a single width wide driveway. The previous one, they just paved where it was existing. And if you notice in those photos, it's much narrower than the actual driveway. So even if, so then, yeah, so if you were going to use
than the driveway,
right, if you were going to use that driveway from the road, you're going to be driving over the green belt just to get to the other 2 parking spaces.
Thank you.
And I, you know, I do realize there are waivers, parking waivers, and I remember having a conversation with Alan previously when he first bought the property. He wasn't sure if there was parking spaces associated with that unit that he purchased. He is intending to rent it out and not live there full time. And and there was an agreement made with the unit below that they would alternate months for parking if he found out that there weren't parking spaces associated with it. So there's a discrepancy between the actual site plan and the application from 1982, saying that yes, there's eight parking spaces provided. And I would also note on that application, it says that there's a 5-foot setback on that application. Even the written documentation of 8/30/1982 that wasn't complied with when the site plan was drawn at a later date at 4/26/1983. So, and there was plenty of room at the time to provide 2 more parking spaces on the west side of the property. For whatever reason, they thought that they could fit the cars in that location, or it never called out how many parking spaces would be in that location.
If I may interject, and on the site plan in the 1982 approval, does show the driveway 5 feet from the property line, but in fact, the abutting house, which would be Missa's, has a 3-foot encroachment over the property line. So the driveway is 2 feet, in fact, from her structure.
So the dimension of the 5 feet is correct. I agree with that. The architect drew my property at the wrong location, and he drew it at the right location because he drew it at 22 feet because that is in the land records as the property line is 23 feet and the property to property is 23 feet and the property line is 22 feet. So I don't know if he's just trying to get away with something. I'm not sure what this was, or we didn't really care about parking in the 80s. I'm not really sure. But that being said, if there weren't meters and garbage cans next to his property, he could easily put the driveway right up against his own property and go out 16 feet and meet his needs for parking and be 5 feet from my property line.
AJ?
Yeah. Brett?
Missa, is the survey that you're using done in 1996? Is that the one you're talking about, Gordon Harlow's
Yes.
survey?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm just a little confused. There's an aerial photograph that's part of the staff report, and I don't know where that generated from, but that shows I guess it's your house with 2 planting beds next to it or something. Is that what I'm seeing there?
I had strawberry beds there that I had gotten verbal permission from them years prior to put there that have since been removed.
So so your if we went by what you're saying, from your house to the edge of the drive would be 6'6". Am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah, 6 feet. Because there's 1 foot from the edge of my
Okay.
house to the property line,
Yeah.
so 6
But
feet. Yep.
they added 5'6" before. Okay, and those
Yep.
strawberry beds would probably not be possible, right?
What do you mean? They were
The
there. I
strawberry-
put them.
They're not on. Are they on your property?
Not anymore. Alan removed them.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to get clear about it. Thanks.
Okay.
And I'd also like to speak to one other thing. There's a communication on the validity of the land survey that I submitted, and I'm not sure why there's concern about that because he's deceased. There's note in the documentation that Alan provided that said there was a granite monument that was at the south west corner of my property, and that I had removed it, and if I had removed it, it would be a crime. So I wanted to give some backstory on this granite monument, which is not a monument, it's a piece of granite. And this piece of granite that I removed was not on the property line. This granite monument was in the green belt, which is nowhere near the property line. So it couldn't have indicated a location of property. And when we were on site together, Alan was digging around near the curb saying he found a granite monument in February, or I think it was February when he purchased the property. When the ground was frozen, he told me he dug down and found a granite monument that I had moved the summer before. And it wasn't a granite monument. It was a piece of granite, and it was a rock that was in the way of my daughter's swing safety. So I moved it to my planting bed, but it had no marks on it, and I still have it in my yard. But it couldn't have been any sort of indication of a property line because it was in the green belt next to the curb.
Okay.
And property lines happen after the sidewalk, so I'm closer to the house.
I guess one other thing is, are we just getting into a property line dispute? Is
I
that?
think that's one of the concerns that we have, that there's a property line element to this that is definitely outside of our jurisdiction. But, we have an appeal in front of us, and we give everyone a chance to speak on it, and then we'll deliberate whether we think it's within our jurisdiction or not to rule ultimately on it. So, Missa, appreciate that. I think that's very helpful for our understanding. Mr. Bjerke, do you want to comment on this?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah, and again,
Great.
start with the timeliness issue and then go to the substance issue. That's the way we sort of kept it with everyone's comments.
Yeah, so correct. The question is actually in front of you right now is whether or not to allow the neighbor, Missa, to appeal out of time. And I've submitted a memo on that issue, and I pray that you folks have had the chance to read it in the materials. But the fact is that the appeal was not filed within the appeal period, and that the Vermont Supreme Court has established a very high bar, very hard line when it comes to determining whether or not someone can be allowed to appeal out of time when it was their neglect that caused the delay. And so first of all, Missa's claim that one telephone call left in June 4th was sufficient diligence to determine whether or not she wanted to pursue an appeal or not, or be apprised of her rights. We don't think that that is sufficient diligence. That it was June 4th, that was a Thursday. The following Thursday, if you don't get a return call within a week and you're not following up, you're just not being sufficiently diligent. First of all, number two, I think that when Scott said there was a hiccup in the system and the permit couldn't be found, I was able to find it on the online listing of permits that are being considered and approved and have been approved with no problem. And we saw it before, after it was submitted, and before it was acted on, after it was acted on, before it became final, and up until it became final. And so Missa is somebody who would certainly, she's a practicing architect before your board regularly. She served on your board. There are other ways to get the information that she was looking for, rather than calling and leaving a message in a general voicemail box. So the fact that she was calling and asking and emailing Scott about an application for 8 Strong Street, when, as she told you, she was given a copy of the application a week before it was submitted, and it stated on it that it was for 4-6-8 Strong Street. So I think that she had a lot of information. She was not sufficiently diligent in pursuing whether or not she wanted to see what was going on with the permit. And the time has passed. And the permit is final, and you have a regulation, as noted in my memo, 12.2.5. Once a final permit is issued, it's too late for somebody to oppose it or contest it. So I'm going to leave it short there, with the pray that you were actually able to read and willing to read the memo that I left you for that. Does anybody have any questions on the timeliness issue?
Alan, this is Jeff Hand. How do you address the fact that she got a response from the zoning office that said there is no appeal for that project, and that was within the appeal period? So not only did she leave a message, but she actually got an affirmative statement from the zoning office that said there is no pending appeal. There was no pending application.
Right. And as Scott said, we got a permit first to do the work at 8 Strong Street for a particular unit. This permit application is on behalf of the condominium complex, whose address is 4-8. And like I said, I was able to look it up online with no problem and see that the 4-8 Strong Street was there, who was assigned to, the actual application number. If she had used any of that information, she would have gotten the information that she was looking for. She was asking about a different address.
And Jeff, you have another question?
No, that's fine.
And Alan, can you tell me where the Z card was posted?
So the Z card was issued on a Friday. We stapled it to the front of the house facing the sidewalk Friday afternoon. Saturday morning, I went and I found that it had been torn off and thrown in the driveway. So we put it inside the window facing the driveway, facing Mrs. House. And that window, I'm gonna say, is 10 feet from the sidewalk. It was clearly visible from the sidewalk, along with a building permit that's there for the other project.
I watched him put it up the day he got it. And he came out of his car and he went right into the property and put it in the window. So
okay.
and I don't know if I have an opportunity to speak again, but.
Well, why don't you add briefly, quickly, and then we can go back to Alan. I don't think we need to go around the robin here very much on this one.
Right. So in the documents that he provided me, he wrote in his documents that the driveway would be 5 feet from the property line. My main concern and was that that the property line be corrected on his drawing. And I provided him with the correct site plan, the land surveyed plan, and that was not corrected.
Right. We understand that.
Well, let me go back to that. So he provided a second site plan after communication with Mary, which I never saw, which then suddenly had driveway dimensions on it. And I wasn't informed about that. He came to the property the day of the last day of the appeal and said, hey, I can do a driveway out this far on my property, which put it right next to my property. And I said, oh, really? That's new news. It's different from what you're showing on your drawings, and it's different than what you've written in your documentation and where the property line is. So that's when I mean, earlier that day, prior to him having stopped at the property, I did have communication with Scott via email regarding that property.
I'm gonna stop you there because we've gone through that, and I want to give
Okay.
Alan a chance to speak. We've heard a lot about it. It's going to be for our deliberation. I appreciate that there's a bit of a complicated history here, made more complicated by COVID. You know, it's not always easy to do this cleanly. We all wish it was, but we're going to have to debate what the merits of that are. So, Alan, if you don't mind, Mr. Bjerke.
Yes. So I know you don't want to go round and round. So maybe not let us go round and round, but Ms. of all people knows that an application is the beginning of a process and things change during that process. And Mary has provided you with the email communications between us that clearly lays out how that process changed and how we ended up with a different result than we started with. But again, we have a busy night, so I'm going to go straight to the merits of the matter, unless anybody has any specific questions. So my understanding is that regardless of any property boundary dispute, we have a pre-existing non-conforming use of the 4-car driveway in that space, and it is been in place since 1982 and has never been relinquished. Now, my understanding is Missa might be attempting to say that it's been abandoned because it is true that the person that I purchased from an estate, and the person who lived there didn't drive and lived there for many, many years, didn't drive, ultimately died. So it may not have been used as a 4-car driveway, but when I dug it up, there was gravel all the way down underneath some of the dirt. And my understanding is that a requirement can't be abandoned. You may want to consider the wisdom of what you unroll when you start to say that a requirement for 8 parking spaces can be abandoned and is no longer allowable. Missa did mention, I'll just point out that the parking could have been on the west side. That is not the case. There are covenants that we're not allowed to put any more development to the west of where the current parking lot is. The property lines have been, again, I'm going to trust that you'll take a look at the memo or have looked at the memo that I submitted on the property line issue. But the property lines have been unchanged at 125 feet for our property, 35 feet for Mrs. property, and 40 feet for the neighbor to the east since they were first laid out. There is a discrepancy in one deed which says 22 feet from my house, which is 75 feet from Drew Street, and the house that Gordon Harlow drew 22 feet from to establish the property line is not the same as 75 feet from Drew Street. And what I've shown you through exhibits is that there was an addition on the house that existed in 1919 when that original subdivision took place that shows that the house was further to the east, and therefore the property line is further to the east than 22 feet from the house that is there in 1986, which is when Harlow did the survey. I think you folks refer to it as 96. The survey was done in 86, and first used in 96 in connection with a fence permit for Mrs. So with respect to the Springer, yeah, Mr. Harris, you said something about looking at the Google map and the curb cuts and the driveway apron. I think what you're seeing is the driveway apron, and it's, in fact, if you go look at the ground, the curb cut is further to the west than the driveway apron. So the curb cut is actually wide enough for 2 parking spaces wide, 2 cars wide. And looking at the apron from the photograph, you get a different impression of access to that driveway. So the fact is that it's not just that the surveyor, Mr. Harlow, is deceased. He's deceased and his records have not been located. This is not uncommon in land surveyors, and certainly not for something 25 years ago. So if there was an explanation in his records of how he got to use the 22 feet from a house that existed in 1986 and not do any research to identify what was there in 1919, then we might have an answer, but we simply don't. And based upon that, I don't think that you have sufficient reliable evidence to find that the Harlow survey is accurate, because it says that it is based on very limited knowledge, just what the property owner gave him and 3 items of found evidence. That side, the side of the house that existed in 1986, the found monument that Missa says isn't the monument and isn't on the property line, except that it's right where the pin is set in front of it, and another pin that's way down the block, doesn't really relate to it. So we think, number one, it's a pre-existing non-conforming use. It's been in place for 25 years and is allowed to continue. It can't be abandoned because it's a requirement. And the survey upon which she's trying to raise a dispute as to the property boundary has been shown to be inaccurate and limited.
All right, thank you, Alan. I think unless the board has more questions, oh, Jeff?
I do have a question. Alan, I appreciate the history on the survey. I'm trying to find a way for us to resolve this without having to get into the property line disputes specifically. Can you tell me a little bit more? It looks like the site plan you submitted has a notation on it that says there'll be a 5-foot setback on the west side of your driveway.
Yes.
Am I reading that correctly?
Correct. And if you use the previously existing site plan, as Missa pointed out, it would be 5.5 feet from, the driveway would be 5.5 feet from that line. She disputes that that line is the line that you should be measuring 5 feet from.
Well, so who wrote the notes on the site plan that you submitted that says setback gravel 5-foot minimum?
That would be me. So I submitted an original plan and then had several communications and came up with several different drawings with Mary until we found one that got ultimately approved. Because 2 things. One, I thought that I needed to maintain a 5-foot setback.
Okay.
From the new property line. And I believe we concluded that that wasn't the case. The pre-existing non-conforming use controls over a changed property line that comes up a couple decades later.
Do you know where the existing drive, the 2 graveled spaces we see in those photographs, how that compares to your 5-foot proposed setback in your original application?
I don't understand the question. So my photograph pointing out the east driveway?
Yeah, there's a photograph that shows a gravel drive with just two wheel well sort of spaces.
At the bottom of that drawing picture, does it say east or west?
I'm not positive. Looks like it's the west driveway.
So the west driveway has always had 2 spaces and continues to have 2 spaces. It says Champlain Heights Condo Association Western Parking Area, Allen Bjerke.
Okay. And how about on the eastern side? It looked like on the eastern side there was, I think what you're saying is the gravel that existed on the eastern side was grassed over. So there was just a driveway for 1 or 2 tandem parked vehicles.
It was just one, it was one tandem parked because, as I said, the person who lived in the unit that we purchased for I think 20, 30 years did not drive.
So if we authorize you to maintain the current use of that prior owner, what they used, and what I'm seeing in this photograph, do you know how far the driveway would be from, would it have a 5-foot setback?
Yes, it would have a 5-foot setback, but it would be out of compliance with the 82 permit.
Because there aren't 8 parking spaces.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Just briefly, Jeff, I can tell you that when I first reviewed this application and I saw Alan's annotation for 5 feet, I was suspect. And I always like to go back to see what was last approved. So that's when our conversations began with the accuracy of the setbacks he was depicting. I didn't think it was possible. And the site plan he provided clearly had been recorded in the land record. So I thought that would be the one we would turn to.
Okay. Thank you.
That incidentally, that one also depicts the 3-foot encroachment of the neighboring property, which is Alyssa's, Mrs.
And I would point out that the deed that set up the condominium at issues notes in the property description that there's a 3-foot encroachment of Mrs. House into the condo's property. So that is recorded in the land records. None of the items that Mrs. is raising are.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I think with that, I appreciate it all from everybody. We're going to close the public hearing on this agenda item. I'm not sure when we'll debate on it, but we'll try to set it sooner rather than later. Next, 262 South Union Street. Application to demolish detached garage, construct garage with attached dwelling unit, conversion to duplex. Are the applicants here, Scott?
I see the applicants. I will open them up to talk. I'm not sure if there's anyone in the public who cares to talk to this item.
Well, that's my next question. If there's anyone in the public who wants to speak on this item, use the raise your hand procedure. And Scott, yeah, you got somebody?
Yeah, I see 2.
And if you're on the phone, hit the buttons as instructed. What is it, Scott? Star 9. Star 9. And so let's start with the applicant. Describe your project and walk us through it, please.
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Then can we share with you our presentation and we'll walk through it?
How do we do screen share?
Sure.
We do have it in front of us. We appreciate the high detailed nature of the submission. That's helpful for us.
So William, I'm assuming I should go with revised plans August 4th.
August, it says 2028-08-04.
Yeah. Okay.
There were several today. There have been a few revisions within the last 12 hours.
Are they different than what we have in our? Okay. Well,
they should be the same, I think.
Okay.
That should be the most current one, what you see there. The latest from what the applicant sent.
So I'll try and work through it as quickly as we can and come back to some Q&A portion of it. We purchased the house about 2 years ago, and we've done a certain amount of, well, you can see this is a view looking over the existing house with the proposed addition, the garage restoration, and or garage replacement, and an apartment behind it with a connector between it.
Oh, they have to go forward on the slide.
You're going to have to go to the next slide, Scott.
That good?
Yeah, that's great. So on the left side is a site plan of the property with a Google map to the right. It's pretty much dead in the middle of the block between Cliff and Spruce Street on South Union. It has close to 300 feet in depth. the house, as you can see, is situated. There are a lot of existing pavement around the house. The garage, the existing garage, which we'll get into in terms of its present condition, is just behind it. And then there's which we always thought was a potting shed, but the people that used to own the house actually live next door to us. And they actually share the drive with us. Have always said that was a chicken coop until some neighbors complained about it. So go to the next one. Well, actually, I'd just like to say, when we were, yeah, that's fine. So on the left is a view from the east and a view from the south and a view from the north. On the top view, you can see just sliding by, there's a little bit of view of the garage behind. The one from the south is not really, I don't think even with the addition, you'd be able to see any portion of it from the street. The house we've renovated extensively in terms of most of the exterior, and we've replaced new windows, done a certain amount of interior work on bathrooms, kitchen, and so forth. And we're now ready, as what this is all about, is to go and renovate the garage and the building project that we're proposing. So on the right is a coverage of, can you hit so I can see? Yeah. What's existing is about 22%. What's proposed is kicking it up to about 29% in terms of coverage. The proposed garage is pretty much in the existing footprint. We've been working with Ryan quite a bit in terms of trying to rectify the encroachment that's to the north property line. So we've pushed or shrunk the building from the property line to conform to the required setback of 5 feet. And there's a connector, stair connector that goes to the guest house behind it with some patio and some additional parking to the west side of the new garage. As I was saying, the coverage is an increase from what was there before, but nominal to the overall 35% requirement. I think we go to the next one. We're looking at the existing garage, and you can see the back of the house. The garage has deteriorated over a long period of time. We've just felt it's just beyond repair. I think we've demonstrated that in previous presentations. You go to the next one, Scott.
Okay.
You can see the foundation on the west side of the house has actually fallen away. The entire western wall is just hanging there. Every time I go into the garage, I'm worried that it might fall on me, but that's why I send my son in instead. But you can see on the lower and middle, the house is jacked up with some shoring to protect the wall. I don't know if it's in this one, but next one you can go to. And then the next one. Next. There was a fire in the garage at some point in the recent past. It just further decay and deterioration, and we're proposing to replace it. And we can go on. This is the proposed set of drawings. On the upper left, you see the facade facing south. The garage, the two-bay garage is on the left side. We have a proposed art studio that's above it. There's a connector stair that's mostly open between the garage and the apartment. And the apartment is on the right side with living, dining, kitchen on the ground floor, and bedroom, bathroom, dressing on the upper floor. The materials, generally speaking, are clapboard to match the house in terms of the siding. Windows are really single glazed for the most part, but they're all painted to match the frames of the existing house. And then we have a metal roof, and then I'll show you on the back side. Single glaze, not single glaze. I mean, single pane, not
Double pane.
single light. That's
Yeah,
it.
single.
Go to the next one, Scott. This shows the layout of the ground floor with a 2-bay garage. Below it is a added parking space. There's an independent stair in the garage to go up to the art studio, so we can come from the house and go into the art studio separate from going in the main building. And you can see there's kitchen, bathroom, dining, living space, outdoor patio, and a pool on the outside. Next. This is the upper floor. You can see the stair in the garage comes up, a circular stair comes up into the art studio. There's a bathroom there and some utility spaces. It does connect to the main stair that can go then into the upper part of the apartment. So there's some varying variety between using the studio and using the apartment, both separate and equal kind of situation. The next. This is a roof plan that's showing the watershed. We do have a lot of runoff from the upper part of the block that tends to, with the freeze thaw, tends to ice up the driveway more than we can actually control. So what we've tried to do with the roof lines is to shed the water to the north, which is both between our property, for which it sheds onto, is mostly wooded and with low vegetation. So the idea that it trees and low ground cover. So we feel that would take a certain amount of water off of our driveway. And the same with the garage, with the patio that we hope to extend some kind of drainage, dry well to delay a certain amount of cascading over the garage, over the driveway area. The driveway has been slightly increased in terms of the east-west dimensions, as well as you'll see, well, you see.
Reduced.
Well, this has been increased, yeah.
Oh, that's just.
Right.
Oh, let's look at this one. Because of erosion, it was reduced, and now we increased.
Right. So maybe go to the next one. That might be helpful.
Because the length is reduced. I
Right.
thought it might.
So we've been going back and forth with Ryan about not only the setback on the north side, but also the depth of the garage and the relationship between the two additional spaces that we have, the two parking outside the garage in terms of their 18-foot requirement and then the 20-foot pullout. And so we've reduced the garage actually as of this morning in order to get the 18 feet fully within the easement requirement. And we've created below on the western side of the garage, this second parking space, and to allow for pullout that's within the shared easement of the two properties. I know we talked with Alice to a certain extent about all these things, and I think we're going to continue to do so with her in terms of things that they may want to see happen in terms of how we share the driveway and so forth. But we feel that there was an issue about snow storage. And one of the things that happens, at least in terms of the last few winters, is the plow comes up and pushes all the snow just to the north onto the lawn. And then it does whatever it does when it pushes the snow around. So I feel that we have enough apron to the north and certainly to the east and west in order to be able to clear the snow off adequately. There's certainly some things we can do to improve both ours as well as hers, and we're talking to them about that. Next one. These are views of the new addition. The upper left, again, is the one you saw before. The garage is on the left side of the view with the apartment on the right with the connector piece in between. The view below that is to the north. It faces our adjacent neighbors. Most of the spaces in the building are utility in nature. There's very minimal glazing on the side. The cladding is a metal material that matches the roof material. And there's very little living space that you see from the side of the property. The one on the upper right faces to the east, and the one to the lower right is what you see coming up the driveway. You see the studio, the connector to the main house. Next one, Scott. These are the architectural elevations. The upper right shows the southern view. I say the main sort of view of the house. The garage on the left, studio above it, and the apartment to the right. And then the other views, the blue view below it is to the north. The one on the lower left is to the east, and the one on the upper left is facing west. Guess you go to the next. Actually, Scott, I think maybe if you pull back to the views, and this is pretty much the end of the presentation, and we're more than happy to take some questions or comments, or if there's a need for any response.
Any questions? Scott, you want to exit full screen if you don't mind?
Sure.
Or exit share screen, thanks.
Yep.
Questions from the board? I don't have any on this one myself.
We do have a couple folks with hands raised, AJ.
Yeah, all right. I see one, Miss Suter has a hand raised, and so I guess I'll ask her to step up to the proverbial microphone and share with us what she'd like to share on this project. Good evening. Suter, are you there?
She's muted. I just asked her to unmute.
There we go.
There we go.
So you can hear me?
Hello, I'm Alice Suter.
Hi, Alice.
This is my husband, Gilbert Suter.
Okay.
This is my son-in-law, Travis Russo. And the questions that I have was, the first thing was the parking. And it sounds like that a lot of it has been taken care of. What was some of the other things? The snow removal, that still doesn't seem to be adequate. The snow is pushed mostly up the driveway. There's no way, their porch is right on the driveway. So there's no way to push the snow that side. So it would all have to come our side.
Okay.
And I see that there's only 7 feet up before you get to the porch. The patio, their patio, the new patio. Between the driveway and the new structure. And that to me doesn't seem like enough area to have snow removal. They also have a walkway that leads to the new construction. And I don't know how they would even get in with the snow pushed there.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So
You have other concerns?
I just wanted to make sure that the easement for the driveway stops at 125 feet. It does not go up the whole backyard.
Okay,
Um,
well, I guess we can let the applicant address that one. I'm not sure the board can address that right now. But we want to make sure you have an opportunity to express all of your concerns or questions about the project. So if you have more, now would be the time.
Okay, I wanted to know the pool size. I've never been able to figure that out from looking at the drawings.
I'm sorry, what was
And-
that? I didn't quite hear that.
You didn't hear it. Pool.
The pool, the size of the pool.
Okay,
The storm water drainage was also a concern. I think that with that has probably been addressed better than what I thought it had been. And I'm worried about the construction parking.
construction parking,
Yes,
what are you worried about?
getting vehicles, construction vehicles in and out of here.
Okay. You're worried that, do you share this driveway?
Yes,
You're concerned that it'll block up the driveway?
yes.
Okay.
We do have a plan, but at times there's going to be 5 or 6 vehicles that the construction workers drive, and there's no parking up here for those kind of vehicles when they're doing construction.
I think sometimes they park on the grass and it has to get reseeded, but the applicant can comment on that.
Okay, we can go back. We can go back to that. When the concern is based on, or concern is on the construction, parking is they did some renovations prior, and it was very.
Who's talking?
I'm sorry, Travis, her son-in-law.
Okay.
Sorry. With the parking that they had before, they did some construction prior, and there was a little bit of damage and stuff at the time they took care of. But this is a much deeper, much larger project. It's very tight conditions up here as it is. Just with 2-3 cars out of here, forget trying to do it a whole little apartment and construction and cement trucks and excavators and so forth, which is going to be needed, and that's her concern. That's all being addressed. It's very tight location, and being a shared driveway, there'll be times I'm sure it'll make it difficult for everybody. Actually, what else did you?
Well, I just wanted you to be aware that our living area is in the back of our house, which means that it will overlook our living room, and our dining room overlooks the new construction. So actually, we're looking at that all the time. And several of our neighbors have expressed concerns about the look of the construction itself. The pool primarily. I know that you feel that it's fine because of the view from the street. But back here, all the houses on Cliff Street, most of them have a view of the backyard. There also are some houses on Spruce Street that has a view of our backyard. And, I can only say that that's a concern of my neighbors, and actually very much concern of my husband's. And the safety of the pool, although I can't quite visualize what that pool is going to be like. Sounds like that it's on the patio.
the concern of the property, more or less the concern is Travis Russo again. More concerned of Gib is the property looking more modern than it is more looking historic. And apparently that's been conversations with some neighbors that came up.
Okay.
Has any of the neighbors asked to speak?
You're the first so far.
Yep.
There's one more John Hall in the queue.
Okay.
Anything else?
Well, I'll let them address that.
They've already asked us.
Okay. Well,
So Alice, may I ask you briefly for your mailing address for notice of the board's decision?
368 South Union Street, Burlington, Vermont,
Okay,
05401.
okay, great. And Travis?
I got it with Alice. That's fine.
Okay, so
Okay.
368 South Union. Great.
Yeah, I'll
thank
be able
you.
to share it with her. Yeah.
well, we appreciate that. Thank you. I see a Mr. John Hall with his hand raised. Mr. Hall, do you want to join us and share your comments on this application?
So John Hall just needs to unmute. He can speak now. Here we
Can
go.
you hear me now?
Yep.
Let me introduce myself. My name is John Hall. You can see on the map that I live just around the corner of the block at 14 Cliff Street. So my property line to 362 South Union is a very short distance, 75 feet. So I can look directly at it. I've lived here 26 years. I've raised my children here. I have 4 preliminary points, if I may make them, and then 6 substantive points. I teach at McGill University, although I'm retiring at the end of this month. So I've been locked down in Montreal almost continuously for the last 6 weeks. So if I speak with great humility, I don't know what my rights are. I certainly didn't send in an appeal, but I hope the situation with COVID might be borne into mind.
You don't have to, this is not an appeal, this is just a hearing.
Okay.
There's been
Thank
no
you.
permit issued, so we're here to hear your comments and concerns about the application.
Okay. Then I just have one preliminary comment. My father-in-law, who's now dead in Denmark, was a very famous architect. I have nothing against modern architecture. Here are my 6 points. The first one is this is an extremely modern building. Burlington, Vermont, and the hill section of Burlington, Vermont is a jewel. It depends upon a historic preservation of houses built at the end of the 19th century and in the Edwardian period before the First World War. This is extremely different. And I am, as you can see already, very much opposed to it. I think it's a terrible idea. And that's my first point. It's something completely and absolutely different. The second point is it takes an enormous amount of space. I have been locked down. I haven't had a chance to measure things. It's a 1-story garage going to a pool, a residence, a garage in a green space. Green things matter to Burlington, and they matter in the modern world. It's removing an awful lot of green. There are other offices in town, so I sort of oppose it in that way. It seems to me to be very large, very high. I would look directly upon it. It's not the modern architecture, but it's taking so much space. It's looking right over everything. My points are a little confused. I'm not going to give you 6, but here's the really important one. This was described as a renovation. If it's a renovation, why do the plans we've just seen talk about a fellow's residence? I thought that there are some famous lawyers on the street who are my friends, and they say, but you really can't change. I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. The residence rules. How can you have fellows inside a garage renovation? It seems to me very large, way beyond what Burlington ought to allow. So I am very opposed to it. There are architects on this street who have their practices on South Union Street, who have their practices, but they have their practices built into a barn, and very successful it is too, very well done. This is something that I think is not desirable. And the idea that it's a fellows residence, it could be used for training purposes for other architects. Who knows what the use will be? This is a dramatic escalation from a tired garage to a pool, somewhere to live. It seems to me to be far too much. So I am indeed opposed to it very much. Thank you. And I'd like to thank the review board for listening to me. All this information has come to me very recently. That's COVID, but my feelings about it are very strong. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Scott, are there any more hands on this application that I see? No, I don't see any.
No.
All right, well, let's let the applicant have a chance to respond if he'd like to the comments he's heard. Mr. Fellows, do you have any more comments?
Yeah, I have a few things to say. As far as the comments from Alice and her family, I think that we want to work with them as best we can to form a plan, both in terms of what the design is and what the logistics of construction are, that is something that everyone is satisfied with. They live next door to us. We share a driveway. We expect to be living here a long time, and we like to think that we can work something out with them that's mutually acceptable. So I think some of the issues that she's talking about in terms of snow removal or snow storage and so forth is something that we could work out together. I don't know if we need to involve the DRB board in those kinds of logistics, as well as the logistics of a concrete mixing truck that would pour the foundation and so forth. These are things that we need to work out with them to their satisfaction. The pool is about 7 by 17 feet. We expect it to be board. It's raised up off on the patio. You know, the house actually digs into the slope so that the finished floor of the living room is actually below grade. And the patio sits up off the grade a couple of feet. And we expect it to be landscaped with border elements to the extent that it's private and it's also secure. And if the fence is a requirement, beyond that is something that we would have to consider. So, and I think I'm comfortable that we can work with them to work out something mutually satisfactory. As to other comments, I feel that in the middle of the block that we're situated, we're actually dug into the hill. It is 2 stories, but it is not overimposing. The block is quite deep. There's a lot of foliage on all sides. The open space actually recently created by the downing of a 100-year-old tree actually poses architectural variety of different roofscapes and architectural types for which this design, I think, will fit in quite nicely as just another part of the cacophony of architectural styles that exists within the block. The DAB seemed to feel comfortable with its modern rendition within the historic quality of the existing structure. And I feel that we need to be looking in a positive and progressive way towards defining our environment as it is for us today. So that's sort of my little spiel on that.
Right. Ryan?
Something that
take her up.
Dogs, but something that came to my attention today was a copy of the warranty deed that explains the shared driveway easement.
Okay.
And a very important aspect of that deed states that the use of the shared drive shall be restricted to single family use. The proposal is for a duplex, so that's
Well, that gives us some pause because I don't know what authority we have to interpret deeds.
correct. And I'll go ahead.
So I don't even really want to get into the interpretation of that deed at the public hearing. It's not within our authority, but that is something to note that I would suggest the parties consider discussing strongly.
And that's acknowledged. I discussed that with my colleague today, and if it does prove to be an issue, it could jeopardize the possibility of having sufficient parking in site or sufficient access to serve the duplex. So that's just
Right.
put that out there. So that's it.
Okay. Questions from the board further on this?
My only question was to the one commenter's mentioned the height of the building. And it looks here on the drawing that the highest part of the duplex would actually be below the highest part of the existing home. Is that correct? Questions for the applicant, sorry.
William, you're muted. I just unmuted.
Yeah, that statement is correct.
Okay, thank you.
To the private.
The only thing I would say to Ryan's comment is that that's something that we are, both property owners are discussing, and we are going to work that out. So I don't see a dispute at this moment in time. So I appreciate your comments, but I'd like you to know that we're working to satisfactorily deal with that. I would have to say, and just that we are, whether it's single family use, I kind of feel we're consistent with that, regardless of what the deed says.
Well, I really don't want to get into that.
Yeah, I know. I
It's
appreciate
not in
it.
our authority, and so I'm not going to get into it.
Right.
And so with that, I think I'm going to, unless the board has more questions, I'm going to close the public hearing on this one.
So AJ, I do see a hand raised by someone who hasn't spoken yet.
Okay.
Cliff,
briefly.
Okay. Brief. All right. Says he's using an older version of Zoom, promote to panelists. So we're going to try this. Okay, Cliff, you there?
Cliff?
I'm not hearing anything from Cliff.
Okay, well. Cliff, if you can hear us, we're going to close the public hearing, but if you have comments that you can't make because of this technology, please email them to staff for forwarding on to us.
Okay.
So with that, I'm going to close the public hearing, Scott. All right, next item on our agenda. Before we go to it, I'm going to just take a 1-minute break to get some water, but I'll call it now. 266 Queen City Park Road, Burton, conditional use application to create 11,500 square feet performing arts center in the existing structure. This is our second go around. This is our second hearing on this item. It was continued from the July, 17th meeting, Scott?
17, yeah.
July 17th meeting. Where we left off, we heard from the applicant. We appreciate their presentation. We left off with, next up was hearing from the public. And as we described at our last meeting, the public was going to be given 3 minutes for comments. I understand there's a larger group of public and something called CRZ we're going to get, and that their presentation was sort of up next, and we're going to give them the time to make that presentation. They're going to have more than 3 minutes. You know, I don't know how long. I think probably about 30 minutes would be appropriate. We've got an extensive set of submissions. We appreciate that from everybody. I'm sure I have read all of them. I'm sure the other board members have as well. And so if you've given us a written submission, you know, please be aware that there are a number of people who want to speak on this, and that if you'd like to just, you know, summarize within the 3 minutes allotted to written submission, that would be great. I suspect tonight that we're going to hear from the public and continue this another time. That's my inclination. And we're going to continue it to give the applicant a chance to respond to the public comments, respond to some additional DPW comments that have come in the last couple of days, and have at least a third hearing on this. I'm not ready to deliberate on it tonight anyway. The public comments will have to be digested, and the applicant needs to have a chance to respond to them as well. Given the extensive nature of the public comments, it's too much for us to do tonight, especially with another item on the agenda, which is the mall project. So I'm going to, Scott, I'm just going to step away for 1 second to get some water. Do you want to call up the first, you want to let CRZ go first?
Yeah, I'll make the CRZ group live, and I'll just.
I just have a quick question. The CRZ memo was part of the previous documentation that we had. I don't see it here tonight. Am I missing something, Scott?
Everything that's included in this packet posting, or nearly everything, is additive to the 17th.
Yeah, just because last time it had something that says CRZ comments or something. We don't have that tonight.
Scott, this is Jeff. I'm recused from this matter and the next one, so I'm going to sign off, and I'll send you my cell phone number in case there's deliberations on the other two matters this evening, which I don't expect, but I'll be there.
Great, thanks, Jeff.
Okay.
So, Brad, if it's not on the August 4th packet, it should be in the July 17 packet.
Okay.
Again, I didn't repost everything. It's additive.
Okay. It is there. I see it on the July 17th. Okay, great. Thank you.
So I'll make the CRZ group live. Just a comment to everyone before you speak. Just give us your mailing address, and that's simply for notification purposes. If you'd rather not announce that, you can email it to me at sguston@burlingtonvt.gov. So with that, I'll make CRZ group live.
So I remind everybody that they're under oath, and if they weren't here or signed in when we first administered the oath, when you come to speak, you are under the pains and penalties of perjury, and that you will swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth when you testify. So, Scott, do we have the individuals up who want to go first here?
I'm still working on it, but we have the first few in order, ready to go.
All right. Why
I'll
don't you
just
introduce
jump in quickly
yourself?
and say that, first of all, you guys are very patient and I appreciate it. Almi Landauer will do a quick presentation, a quick beginning, and then I'll do an introduction and we'll get going.
Okay, that sounds great.
Go Almi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Almi Landauer. I live at 161 Austin Drive, number 139 in Burlington. That's part of the Red Rocks condos that overlooks Queen City Park Road. And I'm actually here on behalf of another neighbor named Lori Hayes, who wrote an introductory letter, but she couldn't be here tonight. So I'm reading her letter now. Good evening, board members. For the record, my name is Lori Hayes. I live at 3 Lyons Avenue in Queen City Park. I represent both the Citizens for Responsible Zoning, the CRZ, and myself as a South Burlington resident. The CRZ, despite being characterized in a recent email by Justin Worthley as a small group of, quote, critics attempting to dominate the narrative, unquote, actually represents dozens of households in each of the communities surrounding the Burton campus, including Queen City Park, Red Rocks, Arthur Court, Ledgewood, Dunder Road, South Wind, South Crest, Home Avenue, and South Cove. We neighbors are legitimately concerned about the scale, scope, and impact of this proposed project. As you will hear from my fellow neighbors, the CRZ has worked hard to focus on the science and fact-based components of Burton's application as submitted, not on fears, emotions, or on the reliance of unsupported promises that everything will be just fine. We remain concerned that there are serious gaps in the information we are all receiving. CRZ members have been told time and time again during our good faith negotiations with Burton staff that our ongoing concerns would be fully detailed and addressed in the. However, this limited 1.5-page document offers little additional information outside of details related to concert security, parking, and compliance with liquor laws. It doesn't address any daytime activities, nor does it discuss how tailgating outside the campus will be handled. It doesn't specify how the Burlington Police Department and South Burlington Police Department will incorporate additional concert-related calls, especially given upcoming force downsizing. Regarding late-night intermittent noise, Burton and Higher Ground offer nothing, although this is the biggest source of anticipated sleep disturbance, as our experts will explain. Most importantly, it does not address how any of these action steps will be enforced, or even if they will be enforceable at all. Higher Ground / Burton staff have no authority outside their campus limits.
Ms. Landauer?
Yes?
Landauer, is this the CRZ response, or is this an individual's? I just want to be clear.
The CRZ, this is the initial introduction from the CRZ.
Okay.
And I don't think I'm at 3 minutes yet anyway.
No, you're not. I just wanted to understand, you know.
Okay. I'm trying to pace it to keep it under 3 minutes anyway. Okay, let's see, where was I? Higher Ground / Burton staff have no authority outside their campus limits. Police resources are always limited on busy nights, and we all know that signage for such things as dog walking and parking at Red Rocks Park is often ignored and rarely enforced. We as neighbors are very worried that the responsibilities of enforcement will, in practicality, fall on us. We will be the ones in the position of having to alert the police, the city, or Higher Ground staff if and when something goes wrong. We cannot express how much we do not want that role. The CRZ trusts that you members of the DRB will hold this application to each and every standard by which you are required to judge a proposal. No doubt Burton is a valuable asset to the community, and the idea of a community hub has real merit. But Burton's cool factor and solid community history can't be enough to overshadow the serious information gaps presented in this application you are reviewing. Thank you for your work. I yield my time. And I yield my time as well.
So AJ, I have a quick introduction. Good evening, and thank you all for your service and your commitment to ensuring that Burlington continues to be a vibrant and livable city for all residents. My name is Laurie Smith. I own and live at the property known as 50 Central Avenue, South Burlington, which is in the immediate neighborhood of the Burton campus. I'm here to speak on behalf of the CRZ and also as an interested person in my own right. And the slide that's up right now is just to show the lacking of infrastructure surrounding this property. Our group is very much in favor of having the Burton campus revitalized. However, this project as outlined, is out of scale for the location. Our goal is to ensure that the neighborhoods surrounding this property are not negatively impacted by this development. We think this can be accomplished by reduction in scale and the imposition of structural conditions that can be easily enforced. We'll be as brief as possible while we still effectively covering the main deficiencies in the noise and transportation studies and addressing public safety as well as the significant infrastructure improvements that in our opinion must be addressed and mitigated before the DRB can approve this permit. Creating a rock concert venue for up to 1,500 people, serving alcohol, including a 2,300 square foot outdoor lounge. Laura, put your computer on mute.
It is.
Okay, no, it's not. Mute your computer. Thank you. Sorry. Including a 2,300 square foot outdoor lounge and operating past 10 p.m. and occasionally into the wee hours of the morning, will negatively impact the quality of life for and has the potential to make life miserable at times for the adjoining residential neighborhoods. What makes Burlington special is that there are quiet neighborhoods within the city. Preserving this is essential to maintaining the quality of life for our residents and ensuring that people want to continue to live locally. The city noise ordinance, which is designed to contain disturbances from parties and other large gatherings, is the reason that the residential neighborhoods around the university and colleges remain livable. Our South End neighborhoods deserve the same protections that are granted by this ordinance. Even approved uses in the ELM zone are required to operate within the constraints of the noise ordinance. After the fact compliance is much harder to enforce, and this conditional use process is designed to preemptively protect citizens from the undue noise impacts. The scale and hours of operation of this venue will have noise impacts that are in direct violation of the Burlington Noise Ordinance. 5.5.1 of the CDO states no permit shall be issued without compliance with the noise ordinance. The ELM zone was originally established and designed as an industrial park, and until last year, the use proposed in this application was not allowed. The infrastructure in this area was not designed for and is not suitable for pedestrians, bicycles, and high volume traffic, and is in a location that has no direct access to arterial roads. These facts present this application from being able to satisfy the conditional use review standards until such time as the city and/or Burton complete the improvements necessary to ensure the safety of the public around this venue. We will address these and other pertinent deficiencies in this presentation and urge the DRB to condition remedies to all of the deficiencies prior to approval of this application. Additionally, RSG submitted a submittal, a new submittal today, which we have not had time to review, and hopefully we'll be able to respond to at the next hearing. I now introduce Doug Goodman, who will speak to safety issues, and I have a quick closing conclusion at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Doug Goodman. I own 364 Queen City Park Road at the corner of Arthur Court. My property there is a direct abutter to the Burton hub. My tenants are very concerned that the quiet neighborhood they love is about to become something more like Church Street. I'm a South Burlington resident and a member of the CRZ. I live at 66 Central Avenue in South Burlington, 05403. It's an immediate neighbor of I'm here to speak on behalf of the CRZ and also as an interested person in my own right. The first issue we'd like to address is related to public safety and covered by the review standard number 1. Public safety and policing burdens created by this venue are well stated in Burlington Police Chief Morrison's letter of April 17, 2020. The chief specifically states that the challenge will be that some of the larger events have the potential to divert BPD resources during times when those resources are normally focused on downtown Burlington. The chief went on to write, large gatherings in the parking lots before and after large events and/or performances by specific artists whose followings include disproportionate numbers of disruptive elements. And for the South Burlington Police Department, after hours activity potentially leaking into Red Rocks Park and down Central Avenue. Ending with the statement, accordingly, BPD approval of the application is contingent upon assurances by Burton and Higher Ground that and followed by a list of assurances. The April 30, 2020 follow-up letter from Burlington Police Department Deputy Chief John Murad signed off on the assurances based on the operational management plan submitted by the applicants. However, neither the city nor the residents have any realistic remedy if that plan falls short, or if the operator does not adhere to it in full. We request that any approval of this permit be conditioned on the creation of a binding agreement that remedies this potential issue. In the email dated June 19th, 2019 from the South Burlington Police Chief Sean Burke to South Burlington City Manager Kevin Dorn, it states that at venues of this kind, the evidence is that even good faith efforts by the operator do not suffice without police intervention. There are some acts that draw more alcohol, drugs, and disruptive crowds which need the help of city services to keep patrons safe. It is what it is. Based on the historical evidence and given the large increase in capacity compared to the South Burlington venue, the best case scenario is that the BPD and the SBPD can expect to make several hundred service visits per year, largely concentrated between 10 p.m. and midnight, but also extending into the small hours of the morning. If passed as prologue, these visits will involve, among other things, motor vehicle complaints, incidents of intoxication, generalized disturbance, accidents, drugs, sex offenses, and assaults, as per the SBPD SBFD response log. Finally, it's important to note that the BPD initial and follow-up reviews of the Burton proposal occurred prior to the outbreak of the COVID pandemic, social justice outcries, and the recent City Council decision to reduce the BPD by 30%. This change from 105 to 72 police officers for the city will have a significant and potentially critical impact on the already limited response capabilities of the BPD. In light of this significant action by the City Council, we request that the DRB ask the BPD to reassess their project review and continue this hearing until this reassessment is completed. We further request that the DRB invite BPD, SBPD, and other municipal safety organizations to a DRB meeting to address the issue of safety comprehensively, and also provide an opportunity for surrounding residents to have their safety concerns. I'd like to thank you for your time.
Mr. Goodman.
Yes.
Who's up next?
We will now have Les Blumberg and Greg Tachi, our two noise experts, will give a quick presentation. Go ahead, Les.
All right, thank you. My name is Les Blumberg. I'm the executive director of the Noise Pollution Clearinghouse. It's a national nonprofit that deals with noise pollution issues. It's located in Montpelier, Vermont. I have 24 years of experience. I was the founding executive director of the organization. In that time, I believe I have read more and analyzed more noise regulations than probably anyone else in the country. And I want to share with you some of the things I've learned in that. One of the things that I've learned is that Burlington's noise ordinance is fairly typical. I have, among other things, analyzed the noise ordinances of the 500 largest cities in the United States. Burlington does not fall in that group, but the population cutoff was roughly 66,000 cities with more people than that. However, in those noise ordinances of those cities, roughly 88% of the noise ordinances had the reasonable standard or something very similar to that reasonable standard that you have in your noise ordinance. Roughly 65% of those 500 largest cities had a plainly audible standard. Just for your information also, for cities the size of Burlington, it is the majority of cities the size of Burlington do not have decibel limits in their noise ordinance. That is not at all uncommon. And even amongst the 500 largest ones, it is less than both the plainly audible and the reasonable standards that you have in yours. The noise ordinance is critical for a town like Burlington, which is a college town. And to have easily enforced regulations and that are well accepted by the community is critical to making living in a college town, protecting the quality of life of those living in a college town. I want to just turn briefly now to your noise ordinance in particular. With respect to analyzing this project, or when you analyze this project with respect to noise, it's reasonably straightforward, your job. You have two tests in your noise ordinance. The first test is a reasonable test. It is found in the general prohibition, B1. And basically your task in that is to determine, among other things, that if the noise of 1,500 people leaving a performance at 2 a.m. through residential areas is reasonable. The second test you have is an audible test. It is in the express prohibition, B2, and it asks you to determine if the noise will be able to be heard after 10 p.m. And those are your two tests in your noise ordinance. And I'm sorry. I think you have my presentation and or my written part. I have not yet had time to analyze the RSG report, and I will do that after this hearing, obviously. But we'll get to that to you in the future. I was waiting to see where Greg Tachi is, because he was going to go next, but I'm not.
Could someone please make Greg Tachi active?
Yeah, I'm busy trying to text at the same time, trying to get him there. That's why I'm stuttering right now.
Well, while you're stuttering, can I follow up with some questions, Mr. Blomberg?
Sure.
So you say anything that's plainly audible would violate that standard?
Not anything. It's with respect to, you have to read the ordinance carefully. It is with respect to music,
right?
And it is with respect to social events,
right? But so you take a very strict view of plainly audible, right? So if this were a duplex and somebody was a musician, would that, and you could hear them playing their cello at 2 a.m, would that violate the noise ordinance?
That would at 2
Where's the
a.m.
line between plainly audible and the decibel calculations that RSG has put forward as the standards for human health? Where are we supposed to fall on that spectrum according to you? Is there no decibel level that is appropriate if it's audible?
So the Burlington noise ordinance does not have a decibel level. My reading of the RSG report was that they were using decibel levels to answer your question of whether this noise would be reasonable or not. And that's the first test. And I have written about why I don't think that's appropriate either. But your question in particular is that, is this permitted at night? And it is only at night. The Burlington noise ordinance is very particular about this. The plainly audible standard does not occur or is not enforced at all during the day. It is only from 10 p.m. on that it is enforced. And it is, I mean, that is what your standard is. And like I said, it is a very, very common standard. It is in more than half, well more than half, almost 2/3 of the noise ordinances of the cities of the 500 largest cities in the country.
Okay. Do you have I mean, I think RSG is talking, I mean, this requires what's commonly called in Vermont sort of conditional use review, or the undue adverse impact on the character of the area. Is your view that the noise ordinance is more controlling, and that the plainly audible standard there is what we should be focusing on, and not the undue and adverse, which is, I think, where those numbers, the decibel numbers have been applied in Vermont?
No, that's not my position. My position is that your noise ordinance has two tests, and you have to use both of those tests. You may, it seems like you have the right to use a decibel standard in addressing your reasonable. If you determine that a certain decibel level is reasonable, that would be what you could do. There is language in your noise ordinance that tells you what reasonable is too, by the way, and I would definitely look at that. But there is a second test, and that test is the plainly audible test, and it's found in B2, and they both apply.
So Les and AJ, I just want to say that I think that Greg's presentation will partially answer your question, AJ, because it speaks to background noise, et cetera, and what is reasonable.
Okay, well, then let's, all right.
Thank you, Les. Greg, you're on.
Yes, this is Greg Tachi. I'm a senior principal consultant at Kavanaugh Tachi Associates, located at 327F Boston Post Road in Sudbury, Massachusetts. Registered professional engineer in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and a INSPORD certified noise control engineer. I've been with Kavanaugh Tachi Associates, where I co-founded it 45 years ago. We've done many entertainment venue projects over the years, and many, many more environmental projects of all types. My purpose here is not really to dig into the noise ordinance, but to try to answer the question: does the RSU report reflect an acceptable condition in the community? And there are a number of points that I've made in looking at the report that have a number of recommendations that I've made in a letter to Mr. Lawrence Smith dated August 3. What I'd like to do is just briefly, and we'll do so within the next 2.5 minutes, hopefully.
Feel free to.
All right. Yes.
No, go ahead. I have a couple of questions, but go ahead.
Okay. Do you want me to answer those questions right now?
No, please go first.
Regarding the noise standards, I think the key point here is, as Les pointed out, is any person to make or cause to be made any loud or unreasonable noise, that's prohibited. And the point is, well, what constitutes unreasonable? What constitutes loud? And that's a matter of, in our estimation, how sound produced by a facility relates to the otherwise existing background sound level or ambient sound level in an area. And that ambient sound level should be quantified by some lower percentile statistic, one that reflects sound levels sort of between passing cars, those quiet lulls between events in the environment. Obviously, environmental sound varies with time. Cars pass by, it goes up, it goes down. But at those low levels of sound between car passes and other kinds of events really should act as a baseline to which sound produced by a facility should be compared. Along those lines, I think that certainly it's necessary to conform to the ordinances that are applicable, but I think it's more important to evaluate, well, what is the baseline and how should we compare sound levels produced by the facility? And what I'm suggesting is that margin between sound produced by the facility and the pre-existing background sound level should be something like a 5 decibel difference. Now, the organization of the RSG report, I think, is fine. It's good. But I think that music sound levels should be looked at a little bit differently. First of all, we have had the opportunity to measure sound levels and published a paper in 2002 at the Internoise Conference in Dearborn, Michigan. And basically for the several concerts that we viewed, several concerts that we measured, sound levels varied. The equivalent sound level varied from 71 dBA to 104 dBA, and the maximum sound levels varied from 79 to 107 dBA. It has been a real concern on the part of venue owners that music acts be permitted to make whatever sound they'd like, and to put limitations on that can be quite difficult. So we have, for other facilities, used 105 dBA as a limit, a sort of mid-audience, in order to give the act the latitude that it desires, yet have some predictable limit on sound levels for planning purposes by the facility. The building sound isolation was not spelled out in the report. We'd like to see more details on that and how the computation was done to ascertain what the noise reduction of the building envelope is. The building mechanical system, the new units that are being put on the roof, no submittal data was provided to us. The sound power levels looked a little on the low side. We'd like to see the sound levels for the mechanical equipment being planned for that building. The lounge, they had used, RSG had used an emitted sound level from crowd sound of about 88 dBA. I went and looked at the 15 loud male voices and used ANSI S3.5 methods for calculation of speech intelligibility index, and determined that 15 loud male voices really corresponds to a sound power level of 97 dBA. That's 11 dBA louder than assumed in the modeling by RSG. So that correction should be made to the model. Also, what is reasonable in terms of 300 patrons? Well, we had two other projects, a private downtown club with an outdoor patio and an outdoor hotel patio. And those sound power levels that were used for planning those facilities were would have been 98 to 105 dBA in the case of were they to be expanded to 300 people. And in the case of the hotel, which is just normal voices, people speaking across the table, would be about 92 dBA. So I think it's worth RSG revisiting the sound power levels that they use in the lounge. Also, it would be good to know what screening they had planned on, you know, the details of sound controls in order to limit sound transmitted to the environment. Parking lot sound, the CADNA computer model that they use, which is widely used in our field, we have it here at our office and use it widely, has a number of algorithms for calculating sound produced by activities in parking lots. They did not give any details on that. There was some concern reflected that patrons departing, excitedly departing from an event would be noisier than might otherwise be the case for parking lots for industrial facilities, offices, or shopping malls. Yeah, granted, those probably are less noisy, but there's no data for event parking lots of the sort that we have here. Perhaps RSG might do some kind of measurements at a similar event in a similar styled parking lot in order to quantify what the sound power levels of those activities might be. In any event, we'd like to reinforce the management decision to prohibit tailgating in the parking areas. And also barriers and screening could be useful tools in controlling parking lot sound activity to neighboring communities. Computer modeling, I'm familiar with CADNA. It would be good if RSG sort of reflected a little bit more on the base beat issue, which is the most widely complained about feature of
parks because of the location, close to the parks and the quiet residential neighborhood surrounding it. However, despite the relative peace, the area is not without its noise challenges. Given my neighborhood's close proximity to the businesses on Queen City Park Road, we are already impacted by such things as the occasional music, loudspeaker announcements, cars and crowds which accompany Burton's weekend sales, group celebrations at the outdoor skate park, and other events. All of these occasional events, though inescapable, tend to be tolerable because they are the exception, not the norm. Enforcement is also a recurring issue. My neighborhood has struggled with fairly frequent noise ordinance violation by a business on Queen City Park Road, and the city administration has chosen not to enforce the ordinance. I am very concerned that a similar situation will arise if a large music venue with a 2,300 square foot outdoor patio plus outdoor seating for food vendors is allowed to open on Queen City Park Road. Even proactive management of the attendees in all the cars, Ubers, buses, and bikes coming to and from the proposed venue will not mitigate the noise pollution it will create. Your decision regarding this permit will significantly impact the quality of life in the neighborhood surrounding the proposed Burton and Higher Ground project. When making your decision, please consider what you are asking the area residents to live with if you approve the project as it is currently proposed. And thank you for the opportunity to express my opinion.
Thank you. And Sharon O'Neill is next, quickly.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sharon O'Neill. I own and live at the property known as 20 Arthur Court in Burlington, which abuts the Burlington campus. There we go. Sorry about that. I am a member of the CRZ, and I'm here to speak on behalf of CRZ and also as an interested party in my own right. I want to say that I moved here 5 years ago, and I'm very involved in my community, and I am not anti-Burton or Higher Ground. In fact, my family, my kids were raised on the mountain, participating in Burton programs, wearing Burton clothes. And so I just want to start out by saying that the residents of Arthur Court met on Sunday, July 5th. And so this is a current list of my neighborhood's concerns. And we're also concerned that the public message from Burton and Higher Ground is that the project will have little or no negative impact on the neighbors. We feel that that is not accurate. The concerns we bring today are related to safety, noise, and traffic. With regards to safety, with a proposed 30% reduction in police force over the next 2 years, what will be the plan to address police responsiveness based on the current need at the Higher Ground venue? My neighborhood requests that a more comprehensive security plan be submitted prior to approving this permit. Also, what is the proposed plan regulation on the large outdoor smoking area? The smell and sound will absolutely impact our neighborhoods. With regard to traffic, 200 to 600 plus cars attending events multiple times a year per week will significantly impact what is currently a quiet area in the night. We are concerned that the current infrastructure does not support the volume of the traffic. There are no sidewalks, no lighted crosswalks, one-lane bridge on one inlet outlet, and a road with a railway crossing on the other inlet outlet. Does the venue have enough parking spaces to accommodate the crowd capacity? Determination of this should not be made by assuming that people will not carpool. My neighbors are concerned that our road could potentially become an alternate parking spot and thus blocking. We have had incidences where people have parked in our neighborhood on both sides of the roads, and it would block any rescue vehicle for coming into our neighborhood if there was an emergency. My neighborhood requests that guidelines for these issues be addressed by the DRB prior to approving this permit. Noise. With the size of the crowd, there could be anywhere from 200 to 600 plus attending shows multiple times per week. The noise generated by this is concerning to my neighbors. People tend to be loud when they come out of a loud venue. Additionally, the traffic noise would be significant. Walk-through traffic coming through our neighborhood late after a show is also concerning, as our neighborhood is on the bike path. And then initially my neighborhood was not concerned about music or crowd noise coming from inside the venue, because we believe that they, or were led to believe, that there would be state-of-the-art soundproofing as required for musical integrity inside the venue. However, the submitted permit notes that insulation and sheetrock are the plan for sound mitigation. My neighborhood requests that a more complete soundproofing plan is in place before considering and approving this permit. I also just want to say, as one of the people who has been part of the small group that has met with Burton and Higher Ground in an effort to build bridges and, you know, make agreements about some of the concerns that we have. I'm concerned that recently disparaging comments have been made about our group. And not only am I frustrated, but I also feel disappointed and a little bit hurt, because I felt like I trusted the process, and these are not statements that show a collaborative process in mitigating the impacts in our neighborhood. Thank you so much for giving me some time, and I yield my time now.
Thank you.
Laura Waters will begin the transportation presentation.
So Lori, I don't see Laura Waters anywhere.
She's here on my name. There are two Laurie Smiths.
Okay.
We share two computers, so I'm sorry for
explains
that.
it.
It's the other Laurie Smith.
Okay. So you're muted.
Sorry, I am not a Zoom expert. Okay. Good evening. My name is Laura Waters. I live at 50 Central Avenue in Queen City Park, South Burlington, which is in the immediate neighborhood of the Burton campus. I'm here to speak on behalf of the CRZ and also as an interested person in my own right. My focus this evening will be the April 23rd traffic impact study and the follow-up additional information that was submitted for South Burlington. A little background: I spent my over 30-year career as an environmental consultant for clients such as the Air Force, the Air National Guard, and MARTA, which is Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority. So I've reviewed and prepared my share of reports and studies. The following comments are only examples and in no way reflect the full extent of the deficiencies in these reports. Remember that this, yes?
Laura, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Scott, you removed Sharon O'Neill, and she's the person who shares our slides. So she needs to be put back up so she can share slides for the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Laura.
That's okay. Where is she? Is she back up yet?
I got to find her first. Sharon O'Neill. There we go.
And she needs to be able to share her screen.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Ready? There we go. Remember that this applicant seeks approval for a 1,500 person venue, which they estimated would be up to 500 vehicles at 3 people per vehicle, entering between 6 and 7 p.m. and leaving the venue between 11 and 2 a.m. However, Norm Baldwin's email to Susan Molson dated 7/31/2020, he states, "I think 3 people per vehicle underestimates the volume of traffic introduced. Perhaps a happy medium of 2.5 people per vehicle works." That translates into possibly 600 vehicles. So we look at the traffic impact study. There's an example of the original study flaws, the roadway characteristics. The traffic study states there were significant construction projects when this traffic study was done, which was July 2019, that are likely to affect the volumes at the intersections within the study area. They talk about trip distribution. In the past, Burton has stated that traffic issues would mostly be resolved by the Champlain Parkway, but in the report they state on page 8 that traffic will stay on existing routes even if the Champlain Parkway is constructed. The Home Pine intersection, which we're showing here, would be severely impacted. Their data indicates that there would be possible delays up to 350 seconds at the Home Pine intersection. And that's table 4, page 13. This graphic that you're looking at now shows 60 cars leaving the Burton campus. That's 10 to 15% of the possible number of vehicles that could be leaving. Also, Burton made a written agreement with South Burlington concerning sending their trucks and buses down Home Avenue from Route 7. However, as stated on page 10 of the traffic impact study, Burlington has redirected truck and bus traffic off of this portion of Home Avenue to try to spare the residents the impact of this heavy traffic. In addition, another interesting aspect of the intersection at Home Avenue and Pine Street is the Safe Streets to School. In the Champlain Elementary School travel plan, they state, this is a 4-way stop with no crossing guard to assist children. There's only a sidewalk on the east side. Parents report that cars in a hurry to get through the intersection ignore pedestrians. Even though school hours typically do not overlap with the PM peak hours, there are school functions such as PTO meetings and festivals that do occur in the evening, and children and families will be walking home at this intersection after these activities. The parking evaluation. The current plan for this venue has about 425 parking spaces, but the venue has been approved for 500 vehicles, or 600 vehicles if you go with Norm Baldwin's assumption of 2.5 people per vehicle. The parking management plan does not address what they plan for the anticipated additional 75 to 175 vehicles or any vehicle parking that is off their campus. Justin Wordley has stated previously that Burton has no control over where people park on public streets, such as Central Avenue in South Burlington. Omissions. Examples are the study area. That's the next slide, Sharon. Page 2. Oh. I guess we don't have our next slide. I lose Sharon?
Sharon's still there.
Oh, well, I'll keep going. Page 2 did not include an assessment of the QCP and Central Avenue intersection. There it is. You can see to the left is the Queen City Park and Central Avenue intersection was not included. The Swift Street at US 7, which is a high impact crash area, was not included. It did not include the 5 curb cuts that the venue and attendees will use pre and post concert. They did not include the proposed curb cut right to the other between Central Avenue and the 1-lane bridge. And they conveniently did not include Pine Street connecting to Queen City Park Road because they state that Pine Street will dead end at the Champlain Parkway and no longer be connected to Queen City Park Road. The safety assessment did not include the discussion of the South Burlington high crash area southbound from Swift Street on US 7. There's no mention of the proposed new curb cut, which I've already said, from Central to the 1-lane bridge. There's no assessment of the impact of the Barrett heavy truck traffic, which is the next slide, or the multiple GMT bus trips along QCP Road. So these are the trucks that typically travel on Queen City Park Road going across the 1-lane bridge. And there was no information whatsoever provided on how that truck traffic will impact the traffic either coming or going across the bridge. The next slide shows the traffic, reflects the traffic data from I-189. Higher Ground states that trip distribution will be 30% from the north, 20% from the south, and 50% from I-189. They anticipate up to 500 vehicles for a large show, which means up to 70% of the traffic attending a concert could be turning onto QCP Road from the north and south off of Route 7, or an additional 350 cars making that turn onto Queen City Park Road. We have run this Google mapping a number of times, all times, different times during the day, and it always defaults to turning left off of 189 onto 7 onto Queen City Park Road, although the report states that it will be split to Home Avenue. So then we go to the additional information for South Burlington, which will lead us to our next slide. The existing roadway conditions, they state there are 400 feet of side path from Central Avenue to the one-lane bridge. What they're referring to is a small paved walk at the west corner of Central Avenue. The remaining is a dirt shoulder where vehicles pull over to let vehicles coming west over the bridge pass. Other analysis, the study states that PM peak hour traffic will enter the site more likely to use Home Avenue to reach the site. However, existing site trip generation, which shows on here, on page 4, states that 60% will travel over the one-lane bridge. That could be 300 vehicles. Once again, this shows you only 60 vehicles coming over the one-lane bridge going into the venue. The Burlington Free Press June 2020 article states that traffic will rely on the one-lane bridge on Queen City Park Road. This is a quote from Burton. So the South Burlington report conclusion is, Burton and Higher Ground are declaring that the operational plan addresses the concerns raised by the neighbors and officials with concerns regarding traffic, parking, and safety. There's no doubt that Higher Ground is skilled at moving large crowds and vehicles associated with venue attendees. However, the operational plan is heavily weighted towards signage and control of intoxicated patrons. The plan does nothing to protect the surrounding neighborhoods from vehicular impact coming on QCP Road across the one-lane bridge, as neighbors, Barrett trucks, and GMT buses are attempting to travel locally on the same route. It no way can protect neighbors on Home Avenue from traffic disruption between Queen City Park Road and Route 7. And it does not address the traffic backups from the railroad crossing near the QCP Road Home Avenue intersection. It does not protect our neighborhood from pre-concert patron encroachment when staff tells tailgaters, as Mark Boulderson said, to go somewhere else. In addition, the site's working to encourage non-automobile trips by working with GMT and area colleges to provide buses and shuttles for patrons to the site. Where's that included in the study? Finally, the plan contains direction to staff to ensure that cyclists travel on the safer of two routes leaving the site when visibility is poor. And we all know what these roads look like, which we will address in a few minutes, as to what bicyclists and pedestrians will have to deal with. So next we're going to go to David Geddes. David's going to he's going to address some of the data specifically from this report.
Okay, could you please keep my slides up on the screen as I talk? My name's David Geddes. I live at 161 Austin Drive, number 55. I'm speaking both as a CRZ member and also as a person with an interest in the development. In addition to my academic background, I have an undergraduate degree from Harvard, a PhD in anthropology from the University of Pennsylvania. I have a lengthy, albeit informal, education in architecture and town planning. My father, now aged 97, was a very active architect and city planner. He was also dean of the School of Architecture and Urban Planning at Princeton. And ever since I can remember, which goes back to about age 8, city planning topics have been a breakfast table discussion throughout my life. Next slide. I'm going to evaluate this report. I'm responding in particular to Jennifer Connolly's detailed report at the last meeting by focusing on 5 key questions. What are the questions the report asks? More important, what questions are not being asked? What are the critical assumptions? Are all the data fully assessed and presented? And what are the red flags in the data? And I'm driving to 2 points. Point number 1 is the study is flawed and incomplete. Point number 2, even taking data from the report at face value, there are sufficient problems to raise questions about the suitability of the Burlington hub development in this neighborhood. Questions asked and questions not asked. The traffic engineers doing this study did what traffic engineers do. They focus on traffic throughput through an existing network of roads. It doesn't matter to them whether the Burton project would generate 2 additional trips on Home Avenue or 20 additional trips on Home Avenue, as long as they can make it through. The study includes a wave of data but incomplete analysis. The TIS devotes all data analysis and reporting to daytime traffic, studiously ignoring what happens during the evening when we have large numbers of concert goers. It glosses over and obfuscates certain kinds of inconvenient data, and it fails to address red flags, choke points, and critical limiting factors that I will show in a few minutes. In particular, the report avoids the elephant in the room. The report speaks frequently about 220 incremental PM rush hour trips, but the report does not have a single mention. It does not have a single mention of at least 1,000 incremental evening and night trips. Is this by accident? Did the transportation engineer just happen to skip over this number? Or is this by intent? I will not speculate on this. I will just raise the question. And finally, and most importantly, the report does not ask the question of what is the impact of the development from a traffic perspective, residential quality of life, by pushing large amounts of traffic through the neighborhood, as Laura has just shown. Next slide. Critical assumptions. The TIS builds its case on the assumption that Champlain Parkway will be built. I understand from Frank Kochman and from some comments at the previous hearing that there is Vermont case law applicable to the situation that aspirational or speculative components of municipal plans do not count in the evaluation process. I will leave further discussion of that to Frank Kochman, our attorney, and the attorneys on the board. Completion of Champlain Parkway is at least 5 years out. If ever, I would reference you to the Cindy Hill letter attached to the Frank Kochman submission. Next slide. No, but a quote from Justin Worthley himself summarizes this situation beautifully. He was quoted in the Burlington Free Press on January 16th, 2019, after a planning commission meeting. Music, food, and skateboard fans would have to thread their way through a residential neighborhood or across a single-lane railroad bridge to reach this corner. The status quo, in other words, is a deal killer. He means the status quo without Champlain Parkway. Next slide. I'm going to go over some critical points that are available if you analyze and look at the data in the report carefully, but also some gaps. The VHB traffic analysis fails to properly assess the choke point at the Queen City Park one-lane bridge. I have 4 points to make. The VHB engineers conducted an informal daytime drive-by assessment of the bridge, traffic and operation, because they glibly say in the report, oh, our software can't handle this. They throw up their arms in the air. As a former faculty member, I would say this might be an excuse for an undergraduate or even a master's thesis. However, for a professional engineering firm involved in a big project, I do not think it is excusable to just ignore the issue of the one-lane bridge. They did have a little workaround calculation that they discuss in the TIS. However, if you read carefully, this exclusively concerns slowing down traffic. It does not deal with one-way traffic. The assessment provides no realistic assessment information concerning the impact of a continuous stream of cars attempting to pass over the bridge during the hour immediately before or after a concert. Laura's diagram shows this well. Imagine that there will be during the 6 to 7 or 6:30 to 7:30 period before a concert, a stream of cars heading down Queen City Park over the road. This will effectively prohibit residents of Queen City Park, Red Rocks, who want to go over, for example, to the Hannaford store. Fourth, even if we are looking only at peak hour effects, the TIS devotes almost all its reporting and conclusions. The congestion will be created on some of the local intersections is unacceptable. Next slide. Red flag number 2. The TIS provides a lot of data about traffic delays, and I'm particularly focusing on the ones circled in red at the bottom. Next slide. The big red flag is the Pine Street Home Avenue intersection. I want to point out that Institute for Transportation Engineering grading scale that is used only goes from A through F. And as far as I can tell, F starts at about 100-second delay. Some of these intersections, Pine Street Home Avenue southbound, are already far worse than F, and they're going to be a lot worse than F. I don't want the report to mislead a casual reader, because the report glibly says that most intersections will remain at C or better. Even a novice at network analysis knows that what matters are critical nodes in a network, not most nodes in a network. So we're going to see a delay increase to 5.5 minutes during the PM rush hour, Pine Street homebound, Pine Street southbound, and 69 seconds westbound on Home Avenue. How many cars backed up does this equate to? I do not know. Perhaps Laura could do a clever diagram. This will provide blocked driveway access. This will create problems at the Pine Street Home Avenue intersection for pedestrians, dog walkers, people walking their children, and so forth. The problem is actually even worse, because when drivers, it's well known in transportation engineering that when drivers face blockages, they improvise. In fact, I will confess that I do this myself. When I am heading southbound on Pine Street and I see a backup at the Home Avenue intersection, I will turn right onto Ferguson, Lyman, Morse, or one of these other streets and complete my trip on Foster.
Yeah, Mr. Geddes, I'm gonna ask you to speed this up a little bit.
Okay, I'm almost
giving
the
the CRZ
next slide.
An hour here, so I do need to pick this up.
Red flag number 3 is the Home Avenue Railroad QCP Road multimodal intersection. It has poor pavement, limited sidewalks and bike lanes, flooding, large curb radii, which lead to high-speed turning, which is detrimental to pedestrians. Next slide. Incremental truck traffic. The Burlington South Burlington pushes all Burlington-related truck traffic onto Home Avenue. The transportation engineers made not even the slightest attempt to quantify how much truck traffic this might be. Next slide. And fifth, the roadway conditions. Can the roadways support the massive increase in vehicle traffic? Conservatively calculated, Burton hub will generate over 225,000 incremental car trips plus truck trips. There is a poor roadway at Home Avenue from Bachelor through the railroad tracks to Queen City Park Road. Can the roadways support this? Final slide. In summary, the Burlington hub proposal would generate 222 PM rush hour trips, 1,000 evening and nighttime trips, but the TIS only focuses on daytime traffic. It very studiously ignores evening and nighttime traffic. This TIS focuses only on throughput, and in my review, there are at least 5 red flags that should be taken into consideration. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Geddes, has that been submitted to the staff, your PowerPoint?
Laura, has this been submitted? It
will be submitted tomorrow, AJ.
Thank you.
And Mike Turner, do a very quick run through of the photographs.
Yeah, please. I'm going to give you 3 more minutes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Michael Turner. I live at 110 Central Avenue. You hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. In Queen City Park, I'm a member of CRZ and an interested party in the proceedings. My focus this evening is the visual presentation of pedestrian and bicycle movement in the vicinity of the event venue. I would like to do a brief introduction to our neighborhood. Queen City Park consists of about 85 homes with the average age of the homeowner in their mid-60s. We also have families with children ranging from infants to teenagers. The only way into our neighborhood is by driving south on Central Avenue from its T intersection at Queen City Park Road, passing by the Red Rocks Park parking area. The only exit from Queen City Park is the reverse of this. There are no sidewalks on Central Avenue or anywhere in Queen City Park. Our neighborhood generates significant daily vehicular traffic, including drivers coming and going to work and local destinations, waste removal trucks, heating oil and propane trucks, and many contractors. Those of us who live here are very active and tend to walk and bike to area destinations such as City Market, Hannaford, and downtown Burlington. Due to the broad lack of pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure, it can be quite harrowing to bike or walk to a sidewalk or bike lane on Home Ave or Austin Drive, or along Queen City Park Road past Arthur Court. There are no sidewalks between Central Avenue and Home Avenue, and a dirt path leading to and beyond the catwalk on the one-lane railroad bridge where the road is very narrow and in generally poor condition. Since Queen City Park Road is the designated road used by all Green Mountain Transit buses and Barrett trucks, it can be very dangerous. I now want to provide you with a visual of what Burton has proposed in their additional information for South Burlington TIS memo. This is what is considered adequate for what they call human-powered trips. This is what our neighbors deal with on a daily basis. And Burton is suggesting basically that walkers and bikers will safely navigate in the dark and in a possibly inebriated state Queen City Park Road until they can eventually get to a sidewalk on Home Ave or in South Burlington. I'd like to briefly quote from Burton's additional information for South Burlington document. Quote, South Burlington raises a concern regarding trips made by human-powered modes such as bicycling and walking. Although based on the time frame of the typical show, walking and cycling trips will be low, some local residents may choose these modes.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but would you just flip through the slides because AJ said we're running out of time.
Okay.
I need to make a concluding statement.
No problem. Okay.
Please.
So let's go to the first slide.
Show them what these roads look like without any sidewalks or bike lanes or anything.
Top slide. Okay. Hey, could you go to just the top one there? That's exiting the venue and heading north on Queen City Park Road towards Home Avenue. And it's basically kind of a country road. The next slide down is passing the bus station. On the right, you have the northern entrance or exit from Burton's headquarters. And further down, you are going past on the left, the entrance into the offices for Green Mountain Transit along a marsh on the right side. There is some sidewalk on the left side of the street. Next slide. Heading down towards Home Avenue with that more visible entrance to Green Mountain Transit. And then we have the intersection at Home Avenue where the traffic that reaches this point coming out of the venue, event attendees will turn right onto Home Ave to leave the area. Turning left accesses, go back to that please, turning left accesses the Red Rocks condos and the South Cove neighborhood with no outlet road. A left turn also provides access to the Oak Ledge townhouse and condo neighborhood with access to Flynn Avenue. So that'll be a workaround.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah,
I hate to do this, but I'm going to cut you off so we can just say our conclusion.
Yeah, please.
And then we will submit these photos tomorrow.
Central
so
Avenue.
Have them all to look at.
Yeah,
hate to do it, but we're going to get cut off.
Yeah. The one-lane bridge is the crux right there.
Yeah, and I'm sure all the board members are very familiar with the area. I certainly am.
Okay.
Run through it 360 days a year.
I think I've seen you on the street.
AJ, I'll just finish with a quick closing comment and we'll submit the rest of our stuff in writing.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you again for giving us the time to make this presentation. Because of the number of unresolved issues regarding noise, traffic, etc., we ask that the applicant provide raw data to our noise experts that have been requested. Your decision on this application will impact many Burlington and South Burlington residents. If this venue is approved without ensuring that the above issues are resolved, there will be ongoing disturbances that will be difficult, if not impossible, to fix in retrospect. We ask that you either deny this permit application as presented or take the time to further investigate and impose conditions of approval that ensure that the issues we have raised are addressed and resolved. The following specific conditions seem necessary and appropriate to be included as part of any approval of this application. postponing operation of this venue until completion of the Champlain Parkway, and specifically all other necessary infrastructure, including but not limited to sidewalks, bike lanes, crosswalks, and relocation of the truck and bus access away from Central Avenue and the one-lane bridge. Reduction in hours of operation to 10 p.m., which is in conformance with the Burlington noise ordinance. Creation of a legally binding, enforceable operational management plan acceptable to and independently enforceable by interested persons in this proceeding. I trust that you, as the board, you will take these concerns into consideration, and thank you again for your commitment to keeping Burlington vibrant and livable. We're open to your comment or questions and comments, and thank you for listening to us.
Sure. Lori, can you have you submitted those written statements with conditions to Scott, please?
We are going to submit all of those tomorrow morning.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Scott?
Yep.
I guess we're going to start working our way through the list, and we're going to put all these people on the clock.
Okay.
3 minutes. And if you've submitted written comments, you know, again, I reiterate, please don't read them. We will read them. You're happy to introduce yourself. You know, we want to hear from the members of the public, but please don't read an email you've sent that's in our packet or a letter. We can read that ourselves. Thank you.
So AJ, just a quick point. First individual in line, Brennan Bush, had sent me an email that I saw asking about video privileges. It's easy for me to do, but I'll defer to you.
I think we're going to keep all the members of the public on audio at this point.
Okay. All right, Brendan, you're on.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity. The timing on 3 minutes feels a little bit unjust given the lengthy comments we just heard, but let me get in. I am fully in support of this development. I live at 84 South Crest Drive, which is right around the corner. I have a lot of the same concerns as people spoke of in terms of sidewalks, in terms of the one-lane bridge. My wife walks from our home to her work at Rhino Foods, and there are no sidewalks, and I wish that we had as many vocal residents concerned about the safety of those individuals as the safety of people who they don't want in their neighborhood. I think to speak to a lot of the points that were made, I think there are racist implications in saying that certain artists with disruptive following are going to cause problems. I find the suggestion that police responsiveness will change due to a minor reduction in their force to be based in racism. I've seen this before in Burlington. This is classic NIMBYism. This is not in my backyard. These would not be concerns for neighbors. Like, notice that you didn't hear anyone from the north end of Burlington talking tonight. I saw on Front Porch Forum, there was a comment about an 11,000 person venue, which is an outright lie. Something I also have found to be a hallmark of folks in Burlington who are not into progress. I think the future of Burlington is not represented in the CRZ. I noticed that all folks who spoke there were of a similar age. They were all white. I believe that noise ordinance as an infraction should be determined and enforced by the appropriate authorities. Regulations should be regulations and not considerations for the design and review board. I would like to talk specifics and not estimates or impressions. I'm curious as to whether any of the people who have previously spoken this call have actually ever been to a Higher Ground concert in terms of patrons leaving parking lots and rowdiness and hundreds of people. It felt to be disingenuous to me. I think there are no children walking home from school at 2 in the morning. I don't find that there is commercial truck traffic in our neighborhood in the morning. I don't find that there is railroad traffic in the morning. If we're talking about 200 to 600 cars at 2 a.m., I don't know why we're talking about rush hour traffic. It feels very disingenuous. also does 200 daytime trips to a nighttime music venue during the day. Overall, I'm in full support of this project. I am an immediate neighbor. I think that the arguments that have been made are entirely disingenuous, and I hope that you as the DRB can see through them, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. We have Mr. Creason. Is that next, Scott?
Yep.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go for it.
I just wanted to speak really quickly. I live on Home Avenue. So the traffic's already really bad. For example, I have 2 young children, one of whom's bedroom is about 30 feet from Home Avenue. And so based on this traffic impact study that Laura presented, I think that was her name, it was talking about how it was going to potentially create hundreds of car trips after, rock shows and all kinds of music concerts up until 2 a.m., 1 to 2 a.m. So in the talking about equity and rights, there is, proven documented evidence of how noise like that disrupts children's sleep and how that affects their learning and all the rest. I'm also a basketball coach, and a lot of the kids that I work with live in South Meadow, which is right off of Home Avenue, which is a community that I think's been designated as a low income or the type of community. And I know lots of those kids who are always out, my kids as well, going across Home Avenue, not at 2 a.m., 2 in the morning, but what the gentleman who just spoke did not mention was people going to the shows, right? So that could be what, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. My son rides his bike in this area, and the traffic is already really, really bad, as evidenced by the traffic impact study that shows that the current LOS is an F on the intersections on Home Avenue. It is already an F, right? So this was said earlier, but Justin and the people at Burton know this. And so, for example, in a January 16th, 2019 article in the Burlington Free Press, Justin was quoted, Worthley, who was sort of leading this effort by Burton, was told a member of the Planning Commission that the Parkway is critical. Without easy access via the Champlain Parkway, music, food, and skateboard fans would have to thread their way through a residential neighborhood, i.e. down Home Avenue, or across a single-lane railroad bridge to reach that far corner of Burlington. The status quo, in other words, is a deal killer. Everyone knows that the situation right now is already, there's too much traffic, too much pollution being generated on Home Avenue. And now the proposal is to put higher ground, which I've been to many, many times. I was in bands forever, and I'd love for it to be there. But the Burton and Higher Ground has been using the Champlain Parkway as an excuse to try to get it pushed through in terms of this kind of traffic. Anyway, so I propose that the DRB, if it's going to approve this application, that it be conditional on the completion of the Champlain Parkway because of the impacts on the local roads and neighborhoods without it. Because
Mr. Creason, I'm gonna stop you there. I appreciate it. Your time is up.
From the words of Burton and Higher Ground that it was contingent on that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Can I get your mailing address on Home Ave, please? Quick.
174 Home Avenue.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Many of my friends around me supported this same exact argument.
Okay, good.
Let's see, Al Margulies.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Great. My name's Al Margulies. I'm at 6 Lions Ave in South Burlington. My wife and I and our 3 kids live about 1,000 feet from the proposed venue. I respect Burton a lot in terms of what they've done as a business and an employer in this area. But I also want to be honest about what we're talking about and the impact it will have on the people who don't just work here, but the people that actually live here. At the last meeting, we heard all about the Burton and Higher Ground Management Plan. We heard about their concentric circles approach to controlling everything in the video booth to ensure no disruption on the premise. Higher Ground, we were told, is, quote, the gold standard for managing these sorts of events. I don't doubt that. They may be the gold standard, but let's take a look at what that is. I sat outside the club last September on a random Thursday night. It was everything you'd expect, but just somehow surprising to experience it all on a random weeknight. Bass and drums clearly audible from JC Park at 600 to 800 feet, much louder when the doors were frequently opened. 4x4s parked on grassy knolls, even with open parking spaces. People outside hooting it up while smoking or waiting for rides. The band entourage loudly partying by the loading dock, waiting for the show to end. Pot smoke wafting through the parking area. Intoxicated groups yelling to each other as the show lets out. Others just extending the party in the lot. 2 trucks revving engines and peeling out. And finally, a guy hanging out his car window yelling, "Nako, woo!" as loud as he could over and over again as he filed through the parking lot in traffic and all the way out onto Shelburne Road. Concentric circles and conceptual management plans sound great, but let's be realistic about what we're talking about. People like to have fun at shows, and that spills out after the show. This particular weeknight was not an exception. Higher Ground generates tens and tens of police calls per year for intoxication, disturbances, motor vehicle complaints, and more. That's what we're talking about. When I first heard about this proposal, I didn't necessarily oppose it, but I've been listening closely, and since that time, it's become clear that Burton and Higher Ground really don't care about the impact on neighbors. They talk about having met with neighbors numerous times, but the only changes that have been made since are increasing peak capacity and adding an outdoor deck and bar. Noise and traffic studies followed suit to try and dismiss the impact on neighbors. I've never been woken up by average decibels over an hour. And how does a traffic study not focus on the 1-lane bridge? Most of us who live here have experienced being on that bridge with a car barreling towards you that doesn't realize it's a 1-lane bridge. We all need to be grounded here to prevent a tragedy on that bridge due to intoxication or unfamiliarity with the area. The only way that bridge functions is with awareness and courtesy, and it scares me to think about the crowd I just described getting out of a show. I'm not a lawyer. Burton's Burlington's definition of enterprise light manufacturing states, this district is primarily intended to provide for industrial uses suitable for location areas of proximity to residential development. I don't believe this is suitable for close proximity to residential neighborhoods. I don't think it's suitable given the traffic infrastructure. I don't think it's suitable for a border road that's undermanaged by both Burlington and South Burlington. Burton continues to make the case that this just won't impact neighbors the way we think it might. Yet Burton nor Higher Ground is willing to be accountable if it does. Alan Newman, Justin Worthy, they're not going to give us our home numbers so we can call late night if there's a disturbance. Higher Ground isn't going to agree to a financial...
I'm going to stop you there. You're over the 3 minutes. I appreciate your comments. They're well taken. I'm going to move on now to Ms. Nelson.
Just give me a second. Lisa, you're up.
Okay, thank you. I have submitted in writing a page to Justin earlier this evening.
Yes, I saw that. Thank you.
I won't read it. I'll just respond to the fact that I do own property and have lived at 155 Austin Drive for over 28 years. My internet is not great here. And we have significant concerns about traffic, police, noise issues. The big thing to think about is that the people who live in the other neighborhoods, there are 6 buildings in the industrial park. There are a total of 6, and there are multi-hundreds of people living around this. And the people who live around this are the ones who are really, really going to be damaged by this project. I'm going to just say that I agree with everything that has been said so far by almost all of the speakers, except the obvious one. Let you read my comments, but the big problem we've had over the years, 28 years of living next to industrial park, is that the DRB often places restrictions of hours of operation on businesses and requires noise mitigation measures on new equipment. It frequently falls to the residents to be the policing group having to push and remind businesses to honor their permits and to respect their neighbors. Once a permit is issued by the DRB, there really seems to be no entity willing to require adherence to permit details. You call the police on a noise ordinance at a business and the police say, it's a business, we're not touching it. And it's only by continuous publicly calling to task that has resulted in a creation of a reasonable sound level for most of the neighborhoods. For this reason, any conditions designed to limit noise and other harmful features of the higher ground project should be structural and not dependent on the day-to-day operations of the business. In other words, it shouldn't be left to employees standing in a parking lot to decide what is good and what is bad. It should be written in the permit and it should be enforceable. That's what we're looking for. Thank you very much, and I hope you'll read my comments.
Thank you.
Gabe Arnold is up next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
My name is Gabe Arnold. I live at 974 Pine Street, just off of Home Ave with my family in Burlington. And I wanted to just express my support for the project. We're so excited for this addition to our neighborhood. It aligns with what's been really a complete renaissance of the South End. It's made it such a desirable place to live for me and a lot of my neighbors and my family. And we believe this project will actually, it won't hurt, but actually raise the quality of life for our neighborhood. I just listened to CRZ and some of the other speakers, and certainly there were some valid issues raised, but I also heard really a ton of exaggeration and embellishment. And I understand that because I've opposed a development project myself and done the same thing. But with all due respect to the opponents who are coming up with every possible argument they can to stop this project and embellishing it, I hope that the DRB will sort through what the real and valid issues are and require those items to be addressed by the applicant and disregard the others. I think it'd be an absolute shame to miss out on this opportunity for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. McNeil, you ready to? I think Colin is up next.
Yep, hey, Colin. Colin, you're up.
All right, great. Thank you very much. My name is Colin McNeil. I'm here on behalf of the city of South Burlington. With me tonight is South Burlington City Councilor Tim Barrett. The city appreciates the opportunity to participate in this process. We submitted our written comments that outlined our concerns relating to noise, traffic, parking, safety, protection of Red Rocks Park, and staffing levels to the DRB back on July 1. These continue to be the concerns of the city. The city did meet with Burton directly to try to address some of these concerns, but as of yet has been unable to reach agreement on these. So as they remain the concerns of the city council or the city council of the city of South Burlington, we just ask that you address these in deliberating and making your decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin. Appreciate it.
Okay, next we have a telephone. We'll find out who it is.
Yeah, Mr. 802.
Hi, it's Sharon Busher.
Sharon.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to make 3 comments. One is in the presentation, it was not clear to me that staff would be there at the end of the concert helping disperse the crowd and try to deal with the noise that could be generated in the parking area. And I'd just like to have clarity on that. Number 2 is I do concur with the many people that spoke about the need to insulate the building so that the sound does not spill out into the parking lot and the surrounding neighborhood. But third is I thought I'd offer my perspective. I live on East Avenue. Centennial Field is in my backyard. And for events that happen there is on-site parking. And there are various little parking areas. I'm not sure how many cars park actually at the field, at the games. But also there's satellite parking where people get bussed in. And, you know, until the Champlain Parkway is built, I wondered why we weren't exploring satellite parking off of Pine Street, not right at the site where people could park and then get bused to Burton's site. To me, that would deal with some of the traffic issues. It would deal with some of the noise issues. And I wasn't sure why that hadn't been explored. And if it had been explored and was addressed and put to rest, I apologize. But I would really like to have that known for everyone so that we could consider that as one of the viable options to deal with some of the impacts that you've heard over and over tonight. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Councillor.
You're welcome. Bye.
Okay, next we have Ben Travers.
Thanks very much, Scott. Thank you, members of the Development Review Board. I'll be very brief here. I think that many of the concerns have already been voiced. I will say I think Burton is an upstanding employer. They've been a good community steward. I think we're lucky to have them in this neighborhood. I should say I live at 92 Home Avenue. I live at a corner that's been talked about a lot this evening at the corner of Home Avenue and Pine Street. I also serve on the Ward 5 Neighborhood Planning Assembly, and I can speak to the fact that Justin Worthley and Burton's partners have been by our NPA at least twice. And I can say that I know that Burton has continued to push the city on issues like the Champlain Parkway and exploring other potential traffic calming measures for this neighborhood. The issue from my perspective, very specifically, is that issues like the Champlain Parkway and issues like traffic calming measures, at least along this corridor, are outside of Burton's control. They're in the city's control, and there are many unknowns about what will happen with respect to many of these projects, especially the Champlain Parkway. My concern here is someone who lives right at the corner of Home Avenue and Pine Street with my family and 2 young kids who, for the most part, has quiet nights, but is very, very concerned about cars late at night pulling up one by one to the 4-way stop here. I will mention the fact that the noise study, whereas it focuses very much on Burton and the surrounding parking lots, it doesn't talk about what the noise is going to be at my intersection with idling cars at the 4-way stop there with music playing or what have you. And so to focus my comments very specifically here, my concern here is the potential for an interim between when this project is done and when the Champlain Parkway comes around. And I do think that if this board is to approve of the project, that there needs to be conditions that are not simply a wait and see approach to the Champlain Parkway, but that put some parameters around what's going to happen at this intersection in the interim between when this project is built and when the parkway comes around, if and when that ever happens. DW has proposed traffic studies after the parkway and traffic calming measures at that point in time, but that sort of wait and see approach simply is not acceptable for neighbors that live around the Pine and Home intersection. I'm not an expert. I'm hopeful that you all will have creative approaches. I will mention that when City Market came around here to the south end, there were some conditions put around that permit about sidewalks and other items along those lines, about City Market having to put money in escrow for certain traffic calming measures, for example. Again, I'm not the expert here. I'll leave it to you all, but it would not be acceptable for neighbors here for there to not be a solution for this intersection for a pre or never Champlain Parkway scenario. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Carrie Anderson.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, my name is Carrie Anderson. I live at 3 Maple Avenue, South Burlington, Queen City Park. I live in one of the houses that will be closest to this music venue, should this be approved. My husband and I have been here for 20 years. My husband's family has actually been here since the 1960s. We were longtime residents of Queen City Park. And I just want to start out by saying that we love Higher Ground. My husband and I have been going to Higher Ground since the 90s. I've been to more concerts there than I could even count. This is not about not wanting higher ground or being anti-music or anti-development or any of that. We are very concerned with the impact on our quality of life and the volume coming from a concert venue of this size. It's very large. I'm all about the hub that they want to create there. I think it'd be really cool. I'd be excited to go there. But I have not heard anything since this process began that has made me feel comfortable with the noise mitigation or the traffic. Just the thought of coming home and having to plan times that I'm entering my neighborhood around a concert beginning, it could take 45 minutes to an hour for me to even get into my neighborhood. Or all the traffic leaving at night. I'm not sure what the plan is there. It sounds like there hasn't really been much of a plan. So I just wanted to voice that. My husband and I are, I'm just speaking as an interested party. We've been following, obviously, the developments and are very concerned. So I'm hoping that the DRB really takes into consideration everything everyone's saying tonight. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mobley. Can you hear us?
Hey everybody, yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your time. I'll keep it quick. I live at 83 Home Avenue, across the street from Ben pretty much. And not surprisingly, I'm gonna echo some of the things that he said, but I moved into the neighborhood with my family in 2009. My children go to and have gone to Champlain School, and my office is over at 208 Flynn Avenue, right across from City Market. So I spent a lot of time in this neighborhood south of Flynn. And I can just say that I'm generally in favor of the recent development, including City Market and the proposed Burton project. And you could say I'm excited about a lot of it too. But I also know what it's like to be a pedestrian in this neighborhood and to drive around and to have children. And living on Home Avenue, we already have a list of concerns about the speed, about the intersection at Home and Pine, about the basically non-existent pedestrian protections on that in that intersection. Going to school in the morning, coming back in the afternoon. You never cross that intersection without, gritting your teeth and hoping for the best. So it already is an issue. And like Ben said, I think a wait and see approach to how the Burton project, the increased traffic will affect it, or whether or not Champlain Parkway comes through. It's already something that needs to be addressed. And so I'm hoping that, I don't necessarily know exactly how the DRB and DPW communicate and come to decisions on things. But if there was some way to prioritize the safety of this intersection, whether or not the Champlain Parkway is built, knowing that we're going to have an increase in traffic, then I would certainly be in favor of that. And the last thing, just in terms of the increase in traffic that is bound to happen, I'm not necessarily concerned with more cars coming through that intersection during the rush hour time. It's the fact that that rush hour experience will be extended from what typically dies down around 6 p.m., up through 8 p.m. when people are going to shows. And in the evenings, this is very much a neighborhood. If you sit on our back deck at 6:30, 7 o'clock, you hear children playing and birds, and that will certainly change. So in summary, I'm in favor of the development, this neighborhood, and particularly Home Avenue and Pine intersection. We just need the infrastructure support. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie. Got on me. Yep.
I noticed in the agenda, it's called a facade improvement. And yet, what are you calling an outdoor lounge that is 2,300 square feet?
Can we get an address to the speaker?
Yeah. You got to identify yourself.
My address is, yes, Stephanie Herrick. I live at 161 Austin Drive, Unit 151. That's Red Rocks. And yes, I have attended a Higher Ground concert. But my concern is this facade improvement, quote, which is an outdoor lounge of, I believe, 2,300 square feet that's going to have some 300 people out there smoking, perhaps having drinks, maybe having their cell phones on. And when I know the number of concerts, it sounds to me, what, 100 concerts a year, that would be almost every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. All right. I don't see any more hands up right now for this. So what I'm going to suggest we do is continue the public hearing because it's now 8:20 and you've got another item to hear. So we've been at this for almost 3.5 hours and I want to get the board out of here because I think a 4-hour board meeting is a bit obnoxious, to be frank. And so I'm going to make a motion that we continue this hearing. Scott, what's our September availability?
We had anticipated this potential eventuality and have some room on the 18th of August.
Okay, well, and then we continue this to the 18th of August. And I'd like the applicant to be prepared to address the updated submissions it's made, the DPW comments that have come in, and the comments that the public has made, which I think have been very earnestly made. Their concerns about noise and traffic, I think, are well received by the board and would like the applicant to be prepared to address those at the next meeting. So
I'll second that.
All in favor of continuing? All right. Thank you for that. I'm recused on the last item, and I don't think we're going to deliberate tonight on the first two items. So do we want to set our deliberation? Scott, what does the 18th look like?
With this on it, it's full.
How would the board feel about deliberating on those agenda items on Zoom later this week?
Just for me, I would probably choose not to, only because I won't be available.
Okay, Brad, when are you back in the world?
The 10th.
Well, then why don't we try to set a deliberative date on Zoom for after the 10th? How's that sound for people?
That works for me. I mean, typically you deliberate on Mondays, but you know, it's your call. Are you back, Brad, on the 10th or after that?
I'm back on the 10th.
Okay.
So would deliberation over Zoom at 6 p.m. on the 10th work for people?
Yeah. Do you want to do it as 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock? Either way.
I think it's easier for Springer to do 6. Is that right, Springer?
Okay. I'm not at work right now because of paternity leave, so I can make anything work.
Well, I have a trial that day that is going to end at 5, so 6 o'clock would be preferable for me.
6 o'clock
6
is good. Okay.
All right.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, 6 p.m.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
And I probably could share this last item, AJ.
All right.
It's not.
Have fun.
Oh, all right. I had queued up Springer for it, but if you're good to go, Brad.
Oh, please.
Well,
Go ahead, Brad.
Zoom seems to be working well enough. I won't tell you everything going on around me, but this is okay.
Okay.
So this is just a request for a 3-month extension for the BTC Mall Associates. And if we don't grant this, they're sort of dead in the water. Isn't that right, Scott?
It would expire as of, I think it's August 20th.
So I would be in favor of doing this. Is any discussion on this, that opinions that people have about pro or con on granting this 3-month extension? If not, I'll make a motion that we
grant a 3-month extension to the BTC Mall Associates. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I see Springer seconding. All in favor? Nobody. Anybody opposed? Nobody's opposed. Then we've granted the extension.
Okay, so 3 months it is.
Then I think that was the last item on the agenda.
Correct.
Well, I'll sign out from the middle of nowhere in Northeast Vermont. And now we'll adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you on Monday. All right, bye.